Chapter 173. Inside the rundu, there was a burst of cheers. Under the city gate, the soldiers were overjoyed when they saw the ground full of arrows that they couldn't even finish using their carriages. The Yudo's arrows were sharper and stronger than Dewey's arrows. Now they could obtain tens of thousands of arrows without any effort. No one expected such a thing to happen. Borrowing the arrows was secondary. The most important thing was that the grievances they felt from being attacked by the Yudo all these days were swept away. The Yudo had set them up, and this time, they made the Yudo suffer such a big loss. They were speechless. They're just a bunch of boorish people who only know how to use their strength. Zhao Shiming stroked his beard and said with a smile, "They don't know how to use their wits." He looked at the young man who was walking at the front and jogged to catch up with him. "This time, it's all thanks to Xiaohe." "Xiaohe's already called Xiaohe?" He Yan smiled. "If everyone in the city didn't work together to make so many scarecrows, I wouldn't be able to do this alone." Zhao Shiming's impression of this young man became even better. He thought to himself, no wonder he was promoted to an official at such a young age. He didn't steal the credit nor was he arrogant. His temper is much better than Li Kuang's. He asked, "Then what do we do next?" He Yan turned to look at the old man, then looked at the people around her. The soldiers around her were also staring at her with burning eyes. When she first arrived at the rundu, she only felt that the city was lifeless. Everyone was just waiting for death to come. Now only one night had passed, and there was something called hope in their eyes. Hope was always very precious. "I will discuss the next plan with Lord Li. However, there's one thing that I need your help with, Lord Zhao." Yan said. Zhao Shiming quickly smiled and said, Of course. Xiaohe, please say it." "For this matter, I still need to trouble all the craftsmen in the city." She lowered her eyes. "Help me make a mask. The sooner the better." In the hall, Li Kuang turned around and looked at the two people in front of him. Yi Luo stood behind Li Kuang and stared at the beautiful woman in the room. Ying Xiang handed over the token and scroll. Li Kuang took them and looked at them before saying to Chu Zhao, "So it's Fourth Young Master Chu." The name Fourth Young Master Chu was much more famous than the Wuan Lang who had come that day. After all, he had a father who was known throughout the country for being a playboy, and a teacher who was powerful enough to overturn the imperial court. He was also born handsome and gentle. It was hard not to notice such a person in the crowd. "Lord Li, my young master was trapped in the rundu on his way back to Shuajing. Now that the situation in the rundu is like this, the Prime Minister has ordered us to ask Lord Li to escort my young master out of the city." When Yi Luo heard this, he let out a sigh of relief. This woman was so beautiful. If she stayed in the rundu, it would be unsettling. What if Li Kuang took a liking to her and took her as his concubine? She couldn't give up her position as the most favored concubine. Li Kuang looked at Chu Zhao and said, "It's not difficult." No matter how dissatisfied he was, he had to give face to Su Jingfu. Li Kuang couldn't help but think of He Yan. In this world, people were different. He Yan was far away in Liangzhou, but because he was worried about the rundu, he traveled thousands of miles to live and die with the rundu. On the other hand, Chu Xilan was in the rundu, but he wanted to escape unscathed and leave as soon as possible. However, he didn't have the ability to force people to stay. The tunnel that General Fei Hong had dug back then was to move the commoners over, but now it had become a tunnel to send these powerless young masters out. Li Kuang suppressed his resentment and unwillingness, but a smile appeared on his face. This smile could even be said to be a bit flattering. "Fourth Young Master Chu, after you leave the city, if you pass by Jinling or other cities, can you ask for reinforcements for the rundu?" He awkwardly rubbed his hands. Right now the rundu is in danger. If the Prime Minister is willing to help? "Of course," Chu Zhao smiled. "Once this servant and I leave the city safely, we will definitely find a way to ask for reinforcements for the rundu." "Thank you." Li Kuang was a bit sullen. When did Dewey's survival become a joke in the hands of the Prime Minister? The Yudo probably already knew that the imperial family was corrupt, so they took advantage of the situation. Just as they were talking, another person came in. This person said, "Lord Li, after today, I plan to." He Yan's voice suddenly stopped. He looked at Chu Zhao and said in surprise, "Brother Chu." "Brother He?" Chu Zhao was also stunned. Why are you here? He Yan didn't expect to meet Chu Zhao in the Rundu. He only said, I came to help. What? Li Kuang was also stunned. You two know each other? Fourth young master Chu stayed in the Liang province guard for a period of time. He Yan asked, Brother Chu, you still haven't told me why you are here. When Ing Xiang and I were returning to the capital, we passed by the Rundu. The Yudo attacked the city, so we were temporarily trapped in the city. I didn't expect that brother he would come. When Chu Zhao said this, he actually smiled. We can be considered to be fated. Who would have thought that she and Chu Zhao had been separated from each other for such a long time? She didn't expect to meet him in Rundu. This really was as Chu Zhao had said. Let's go together. Although she had many questions, now wasn't the time to talk. He Yan said to Chu Zhao, Brother Chu, I still have something to discuss with Lord Li. If you aren't in a hurry, can you wait until I finish speaking with Lord Li before coming back? It's fine, I'm not in a hurry. Chu Zhao made a pleased gesture. He Yan said to Li Kuang, Lord Li, let's go inside and talk. Li Kuang and He Yan entered the inner room. Yi Luo glanced at the two of them, then bowed and left the room. Ing Xiang said hesitantly, Fourth young master, we won't leave for now. But the Prime Minister, I have my own plans. After a while, Ing Xiang said, Fourth young master, are you not leaving because you're worried about Miss He? Chu Zhao didn't answer her question. His smile faded. Ing Xiang, you've said too much. Ing Xiang didn't say anything. Inside the room, Li Kuang turned around and looked at He Yan. You still want to hang scarecrows? The Yudo fell for it once. They won't fall for it a second time. Those Yudo are stupid, but they're also cunning. After this lesson, they'll only be more suspicious in the future. Anyway, there's no loss in hanging scarecrows at night. Why don't Lord Li give it a try? If they're still willing to fall for it, it'll be good to collect more arrows. What if they don't fall for it? That's even better. Li Kuang shook his head. Brother He, I don't understand what you're trying to do. He Yan looked at Li Kuang. She had also fought alongside Li Kuang on the battlefield in the past. Li Kuang was a serious and old-fashioned person. When he fought, he was very methodical. Although he was capable, he didn't like to use tricks. He Yan turned around and looked at the map hanging on the wall in the room. Lord Li, if you were the Wutua people, and you knew that you were played like a fool last night, and you played the same trick again today, what would you do tomorrow if it was the same? I would be so angry that I wouldn't fall for it again. You wouldn't shoot arrows at the people coming down from the city gate tower? Of course. That's good. He Yan turned around and looked at him with a smile. Then for the third time, our people can directly leave the city. After all, they'll think that the people coming down from the city gate tower are fake scarecrows. Li Kuang was stunned. Everyone had heard of the story of the boy who cried wolf. They were fooled once or twice, but the third time, even a fool wouldn't believe it. Yudo was the same. They lost so many arrows in vain. Even if they had a few more chances, they wouldn't shoot at the scarecrows. They didn't know that in the last time, the scarecrows were quietly replaced by real Runda soldiers. They sneaked into their camp under the cover of the night. Li Kuang understood He Yan's meaning, but there was still something he didn't understand. You mean we should let them leave the city? Lord Li, I've said it before. It's better to attack than to defend. If we continue to defend like this, sooner or later, the Yudo will immediately attack the city. Yesterday's arrow borrowing had already angered them. Now is the time when they're least calm. We can still find an opportunity to attack them after they've recovered. The Runda's troops won't be able to stop them from breaking the city gate. Li Kuang's heart jumped when he heard this. He couldn't help but say, Of course I know this. But even if we sneak attack at night, we still don't have enough troops. It's impossible if we don't wipe out the Yudo soldiers in one fell swoop. What we need to do is burn their provisions and break their morale. Without provisions, the Yudo will panic and their morale will be unstable. They will be even more hesitant against the Rundu and buy us some time. He Yan said. Lord Li asked for help from Jinling. Jinling. He Yan looked at him. Lord Li, don't place your hopes on hopeless people. General Fei Hong won't come. If he came, he would have come a long time ago. If the Rundu wants to defend, we must find another way to survive. No matter how much you trust Hirufei, the lives of tens of thousands of Runda's citizens cannot be compared to your trust. The young man's eyes were firm and his tone was unquestionable. For a moment, Li Kuang's heart wavered. After a while he looked at Hien. That's easy for you to say. Even if you sneak attack at night, how can you guarantee that you can burn the Yudo's provisions? They have a lot of troops guarding the provisions. I'm afraid that before they even get close, they will be discovered by the Yudo soldiers. 500 men. What? I need 500 elite soldiers, the young man said. Lord Li knows better than me what the vanguard means. With me as the leader, the 500 vanguard will definitely burn their provisions. Even if we die on the battlefield under the blades of the Yudo, it doesn't matter. Lord Li, please continue to defend the city. Don't waste everyone's sacrifice. Of course, she said. If we can bring back Huyate's head, that would be even better. Ever since the day the scarecrow borrowed the arrows, for 3 days in a row, when night fell, dozens of ropes would slowly hang down from the Runda's city tower. There would be people hanging on the ropes that would fall to the ground. Not long after, another group of people would follow the same pattern. At first, the Yudo would test the waters by shooting dozens or hundreds of arrows. In the end, they were too lazy to be fooled and only shot a few scattered arrows before stopping. All the craftsmen in the city gathered together and worked through the night to make masks. Wang Ba dragged an ox cart full of boxes over. He and the others moved all the boxes to the ground and said to Hien, "It's all here." Under everyone's gaze, Hien walked forward and bent down to open the lid of a box. The box was filled with masks. Zhao Shiming picked up a mask and looked at it. He saw that the mask had a green face and fangs, and its eyes were like copper bells. It was very scary. He couldn't help but let go of the mask and let it fall back into the box. He muttered, "It's quite scary." "Ahiga, are we going to wear these masks to fight the Yudo?" Xiao Mai asked nervously. "These are all masks of evil spirits. It's really scary." Hien smiled. "Is it scary? I don't think so. When they were in Jiang, a liar mask was enough to make Ling Xiao and the others run away. If they saw the masks now, they would probably be scared to death." When Zhao Shiming recruited all the craftsmen in the Rundu to make the masks for her, Hien only had one request. The more creepy and scary the masks looked, the better. It would be best if they looked like the little ghosts in the 18 levels of hell, ferocious and ugly. When she looked at the masks, she felt that they were really ugly, but not scary. It was probably because in her life, humans were much scarier than ghosts. The truly creepy and scary things she had seen were far worse than this. Among the masks in the box, the one at the top was particularly different. It didn't look like there were any fancy patterns on it. The whole mask seemed to be made of iron, and it was airtight. Only a pair of eyes and chin could be seen. Hien picked up the mask and gently covered her face. Wang Ba was dissatisfied. "Why does yours look so much better? Can't you treat everyone equally? Why do we have to wear something that even dogs think is ugly?" Li Kuang sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "General He." Everyone looked at Li Kuang. Jiang Jiao smiled. "Lord Li, brother, he is only Muan Lang now. He hasn't been promoted to general yet." Li Kuang realized that his words were misunderstood by others. He explained, "I mean, this mask is General Fei Hong's mask." When he and Hirufei fought side by side in the past, Hirufei had worn a mask that looked very similar to this one. He wanted to take it off a few times, but it was like the mask grew on Hirufei's face. He couldn't take it off no matter how hard he tried. Later, his beloved concubine Iluo told him that Hirufei cared a lot about the scar on his face. It was better not to expose other people's shortcomings. Li Kuang gave up on the idea. A few years later, Hirufei returned to the capital. It was said that he took off his mask in front of the emperor. He had a handsome and upright face, and it was very stunning. When Li Kuang heard this, he was very angry. He felt that this person was crazy. What he said about being ugly and unattractive was all nonsense. It was possible that he was just looking for a gimmick for himself to make others feel the contrast. Apart from seeing Hirufei once when he went to court in the capital, the two of them hadn't seen each other for a few years. Now he saw the shadow of Hirufei in the youth in front of him. He was heroic and generous as always. But he definitely wasn't Hirufei. Li Kuang muttered in his heart. Could it be that He Rufei had a brother in his family? This youth was still young, but he already had the demeanor of a general. And they both had the surname He. Did He Yuansheng also have an illegitimate child outside like Chu Linfeng? He Yin didn't know that Li Kuang's thoughts had already drifted so far. On the side, Jiang Jiao asked, General Fei Hong's mask? Lord Li means that this mask is very similar to General Fei Hong's mask? It had been too long. He couldn't remember the details of He Rufei's mask, but he felt that it wasn't far off. He nodded, it's very similar. Ian smiled slightly. Ever since He Rufei replaced her as Fei Hong, she never thought that there would be a day when she would wear this familiar mask. Brother He, what are you trying to do? Huang Xiong was puzzled. Fake and real, real and fake. Huyate also hasn't seen the real General Fei Hong. But he must have heard of the masked general's fierce battle with the Western Chang people. If I wear this mask and kill my way into the enemy camp, they won't know who's under the mask. Their hearts will be wary, and their morale will be in chaos. That will be our chance. Li Kuang suddenly understood. I want to pretend to be General Fei Hong, the youth said. The night gradually deepened, and it began to drizzle tonight. The sound of insects could be heard in the wilderness. The Yuchuo soldiers were resting in their tents. A few days ago, Li Kuang's scarecrow to borrow arrows in run had caused them to waste 100,000 arrows. They had been cleaning up these past few days. 100,000 arrows was not a small number, and their original plans had to be changed. Huyate was flustered and exasperated, and he killed several archers. And Li Kuang's scarecrow to borrow arrows continued. Every night, there would be scarecrows hanging down from the city walls. At the beginning, the Yuchuo soldiers still had vigilant thoughts when shooting arrows, but later, they were no longer fooled, and even felt that Li Kuang's actions were mocking and humiliating them. Huyate angrily said, when the day comes, I will bury all the Runda soldiers alive. I will chop that bastard Li Kuang into pieces in front of the entire Runda city. After all, being played in circles was truly too shameful. He was still mocking Maka earlier, but he didn't expect that it would be his turn so soon. General, what if Li Kuang releases those scarecrows again tonight? The subordinate asked. What do we do? Huyate asked with a dark face. Do you want me to be a fool again? Idiot. The subordinate didn't dare to reply. On the city walls, He Yan, dressed in black, was currently tying ropes around her body. Behind her, there were 500 elite soldiers that Li Kuang had selected for her from the Runda soldiers, each of them outstanding in their own way. Xiaomai and Hong Shan weren't originally part of the Liang province vanguard, and their skills were only average. Looking at the brothers preparing, Xiaomai worriedly said, Ehigu, those Yudo, will they really not shoot arrows here? If they shoot here, wouldn't it be too late for everyone to turn back? He Yan stood on her tiptoes and patted his head. Although Xiaomai had already grown taller than her, there were many times when he was more like a child, which always made He Yan think of He Yinsheng. She patiently said, all things under the heavens are born from something, and something is born from nothing. On the first day, we used the scarecrow to borrow arrows to create this kind of illusion, and purposely let the Yudo see through it. They thought that they knew our plan, and let down their guard. After that, they turned nothing into something, turned what was false into reality, and turned what was false into reality. When our people really attack them at night, Huyate will definitely think that it's fake and won't be on guard. We will take advantage of this opportunity to catch them off guard. But how can you be sure? Xiaomai didn't give up. He Yan said, there is nothing in this world that can be confirmed for sure. I can only try my best to guess what Huyate is thinking. This was a psychological battle, and also a huge gamble. He Yan turned her head and looked at the people behind her. These carefully selected Runda soldiers, because of the long time spent fighting the Yudo, looked very thin and weak, but their eyes were burning with fire. They were attacked in front of their home. And now they finally had a chance to fight back. Even if the price was their lives, the Wei men didn't care. When we go down, maybe the Yudo won't shoot arrows, but maybe they will. The brothers who are shot must not make a sound or move. He Yan paused for a moment, then continued. Only when we treat ourselves as scarecrows, will the Yudo believe that we are really scarecrows. Li Kuang's face was solemn. He naturally knew what He Yan meant. When there is war, there will be sacrifices, especially tonight's 500 elite soldiers. If they made a sound or moved after being shot, it was very likely that the Yudo would find out. At that time, all their previous efforts would be wasted. But to endure the pain of being shot was too difficult, too difficult. Maybe this arrow will injure us. Maybe we will die. Hien looked at everyone and said calmly, but we have to remember what our goal is. Even if we die, we will die to protect the Rundu. The Yudo's arrows don't have a specific target. It can hit anyone, including me. I need you to understand the possible consequences. If anyone can't accept it now, you can stand up and leave. Otherwise, if the entire night attack fails because of one person, I will not let you off easily. The young man's eyes were cold, and his eyes were cold. Usually, he was gentle and easy to talk to, but when he was really cold, no one dared to refute. No one stood up. Li Kuang was surprised to find that he had unknowingly handed over the command of the Rundu to this young man. He was still young, and he didn't even know this Muan Lang called Hien. But he had the ability to convince people, just like that year, when General Fei Hong was still the deputy general. Is everyone ready? Yes. Very good. Hien curled her lips and put the mask on her face. The mask covered the young man's face, and even the immature childishness disappeared, revealing only a pair of beautiful eyes that were as sharp as a knife, concealing all the sharpness of the young man. She walked in front of Li Kuang, and before Li Kuang could react, she snatched the sword from Li Kuang's hand. Lord Li, lend me your sword. Hey. Li Kuang was slightly annoyed. This person did it a little too naturally. Li Kuang's sword was a good sword. Although it was not as good as Qing Lang's, it was still sharper and lighter than ordinary swords. Hien weighed the sword in her hand. For a moment, it was as if she had returned to the battlefield in the past. She was still the general who led the Fuyue army to charge and break through the enemy lines. General Fei Hong cannot be without a sword. She turned her head and said coldly, "Boys, put on your masks and follow me." Chapter 174. It began to drizzle in the night. The wind suddenly picked up, and the drizzle carried a trace of coldness as it fell into the vast wilderness. Many of the torches near the tents were extinguished by the wind. The Yudo soldiers cursed. When they were stationed outside, it was better to have a sunny day than to have a rainy day. For a moment, their gazes towards the city were filled with greed and savagery. The Rundu could live in houses that could shelter them from the wind and rain. It was said that Jinling had countless beauties, and when they reached the capital, there would be endless good things. An ordinary concubine in the imperial palace had better food and clothing than the ministers of the Yudo kingdom. Soon, when Lord Huyate gave the order to attack, the lord of the city would be theirs. The Yudo soldiers looked at the tightly shut city gates as if they were looking at a fat dog. Their eyes were filled with greed. At this time a rope hung down. Under the night sky, a figure could be seen dangling from the rope. Not long after, many ropes appeared at the same time, each with several figures dangling from them. The patrolling Yudo soldiers said, "Quickly go and tell the general that the Rundu have released scarecrows again." Huyate was drinking in the camp. When he heard the news, he sneered. "They really think that we send them arrows every day. Tell the others to just release a few arrows. If there are any more, even if they break, we won't give them to those Dewey spineless people." The subordinate accepted the order and left. The rope swayed slightly. Hien was one of the first to descend the tower. Her movements were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, her feet touched the ground. Before she could steady herself, she heard the whooshing sounds of arrows above her head. Her heart tightened. The Yudo had released arrows. This was actually within her expectations. Before this, she had already ordered people to release scarecrows twice. However, she couldn't prevent the vigilant Yudo from occasionally releasing a few arrows to test the waters. These arrows might have missed, or they might have hit some of the soldiers, but there was no sound. Other than the sound of the rain and wind, there was no other sound. As she said, no matter how painful it was, she had to endure it. Only by treating herself as a scarecrow would the Yudo believe that the one tied to the rope hanging from the tower was a scarecrow. A soft sound came from beside him. There were people coming down from the left and right. 500 elite soldiers followed closely behind and landed on this piece of land. Time was running out. Fortunately, the Yudo only fired a few arrows at the beginning, and then there was no more movement. Probably because they did not hear anything. They were sure that today was the same as before, Li Kuang's trick of borrowing the arrow. So they did not want to be fooled again. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, all the people had arrived. Among the 500 people, there were a total of 3 who were injured by the Yudo's arrows. Fortunately, none of them were seriously injured. He Yin ordered the 3 of them to grab the rope and return to the city. The rest of the people followed her to sneak into the Yudo's tent. The night rain was the best cover. The curtain of rain covered everything, and everything in the world was shrouded in darkness. Near the tents, patrolling soldiers were walking around with shaky torches. The Yudo's soldiers and horses were very relaxed. They probably thought that victory was inevitable, and they did not believe that the Runda's soldiers and horses would dare to walk right into their trap and launch a sneak attack. Even the patrolling soldiers were not very serious about their patrols. The wilderness was vast and empty. There were not even trees for shelter, only short shrubs and stones. The Yudo's camp was very convenient. This kind of place could not hide many people. But at the same time, in this kind of place, it was very easy to find where their supply camp was located. Ian gestured to the people behind her. All the elite soldiers followed her instructions and sneaked into the nearby tents. They had to find the place where the supplies were stored first. Ian waved her hand. Jiang Jiao, Wang Ba, and the others followed her. The Liangzhou guards were familiar with each other and knew how to cooperate. It was best for them to find the place where the supplies were stored and burn them. A Yudo soldier sat in front of the tent and drank. The Yudo was crude and liked to drink strong alcohol. He disliked the Runda's wine for being too sweet and tasteless, but he was reluctant to let go of it. He poured the wine from the exquisite wine jar into his mouth, and casually threw it at his feet without any reluctance. Although the wine was sweet, it was still wine. Not long after, he felt a little tipsy. He stood up shakily and walked to the shrubs on the edge of the wilderness. He undid his pants and was about to pee. Halfway through, he suddenly felt someone patting his shoulder. He thought it was the other soldiers who followed him. He turned around impatiently and saw the face of an evil spirit behind him, smiling eerily at him. When people were especially scared, they could not even make a sound. This Yudo was the same. His mind went blank for a moment, and he felt his whole body turn cold. Before he could say the word ghost, a cold light flashed in front of him. With a soft thud, his head fell to the ground. The masked man squatted down and dragged the man's body into the depths of the bushes. Not long after, there were no more traces of the Wuxia people outside. Only then did a black shadow quietly sneak into the camp. At the same time, countless evil spirits appeared in the Yudo's camp and silently took away the lives of a large number of Yudo. Before these Yudo died, they did not know who killed them. They only remembered that a ghostly face had suddenly appeared in the darkness, and it was eerie and terrifying. Another Yudo fell. He was dragged into an empty tent and pretended to be asleep. The 2 masked men nodded to each other, and a trace of pleasure flashed in their eyes. 500 people, except for Hien and 500 evil spirit masks. The black-clothed youth with a biting cold expression said to them, "The Yudo believe in ghosts and gods and reincarnation. They kill people like flax and do all kinds of evil, but they insist on worshipping Buddha statues in every household. If we launch a night attack, everyone will be wearing these ferocious-looking demon masks. If we suddenly appear in the darkness, the Wuxia people will have ulterior motives and will inevitably be frightened. In a state of shock, their morale will easily drop. This will be our opportunity." Now it seemed that this was indeed the case. He did not expect that the Yudo barbarians, who had always boasted of their courage and bravery, would actually be afraid of ghosts and gods. Hian's idea actually came from the lyre mask during the Jiang Water God Festival. The lyre mask was only ugly, but it was already hated and rejected by the people of Jiang City. For the Yudo, the horror of evil spirits was enough to shake their morale. The Yudo's tents were not close to each other, and there was also a distance between the tents of the ordinary soldiers and the deputy commanders. When Hien passed by a particularly spacious and luxurious tent, he heard the painful cries of women coming from inside. The dim light in the tent reflected the shadows inside. He could vaguely see the struggling women and sinister men, accompanied by the unbridled teasing of the Yudo and the crying of the women. It was enough to make one tremble with fear. He Yan unconsciously stopped and looked into the tent. Jiang Jiao, who was beside him, was shocked. They had not found a place to store the provisions. If He Yan could not control himself and made a move at this time, everything would be for naught. At that time, not only would the captive women of the Runda die in vain, but also the vanguards who had followed them to their deaths today. Although he sympathized with these women very much, in times of war, these women were in a world of chaos. However, in this chaotic world, women did not have the ability to protect themselves. Once they were captured, they could only become the playthings of the enemy. Shirtu was also worried. He carefully pulled He Yan's sleeve. He Yan looked away and waved his hand, indicating for them to continue moving forward. Jiang Jiao sighed in relief. With He Yan's righteous character, he was really afraid that He Yan would rush in and expose himself. The crying of the women gradually faded away, but it did not seem to have faded away. It lingered in everyone's ears. Everybody was well aware that if they could not burn the Wutua's provisions tonight, if they could not catch them unprepared, it would not be long before the city of Rundu was breached, and cries like the one they heard tonight would be heard everywhere. This was how cruel war was. After sneaking in for a while, the number of Wutua people patrolling the area increased, holding torches as they walked back and forth. The number of soldiers' tents in the vicinity had also decreased by a lot. There was a very large tent where dozens of carriages were parked outside. He Yan and Wangba stopped and hid in the bushes behind them. This was the place where the Yudo stored their provisions. With so much provisions, if they could move them back to the Runda city, it would solve many of their urgent needs. These soldiers would not be starved to death, and the people in the city would not have to hunt for rats and weeds to eat. But He Yan was also well aware that they couldn't take away these provisions. If they were greedy, the result would be that no one would be able to leave. Not only would they not be able to take away a single portion of the provisions, they would also lose the lives of hundreds of people here. The way of war was also the way of giving up. If you wanted to win, you had to give up something. The Yudo soldiers guarding the provisions were very vigilant. They looked around from time to time. The torches lit up the surroundings, making it impossible for them to sneak in and set fire to the area like before. What should we do? Shirtu gestured as he asked. He Yan had already thought of this point. She pointed in front of her, then pointed at herself, and pointed at the place where the provisions were stored. This was the second method they had discussed before they set off. However, this method was too dangerous for He Yan. Shirtu was still a little hesitant. He Yan smiled and asked him to extend his hand. She stretched out her index finger and wrote on his palm. Everyone looked carefully and saw that she was not writing. Instead, she had drawn an imaginary hill and inserted a flag. This was to remind them of the battle for the flag. Back then, when the Liang province guards fought for the flag on Mount Baiyue, it was also the 5 of them. At that time, they had just started their daily training and had not even seen the Yudo before. They also did not know what the real battlefield was. On such a mountain, they took all 20 flags. If they wanted to rob, they had to act like they were robbing. It was just that their current targets had changed from their comrades in the Liang province guard to the hateful and vicious Wutua people. What they were fighting over was not 20 insignificant flags, but the provisions that the Wutua people viewed as a treasure. What they sought was not the glory of a tiny guard post, not the #1 position that would make them vain and proud, but the survival of the tens of thousands of people in Run capital. As long as the 5 of them worked together, they could do it back then, and they could do it now. A smile spread from the eyes behind the mask. He Yan gave them a light high five and took the lead to disappear into the night. The wind was stronger than before. The slanting drizzle hit their bodies, creating a chill. Did you hear something just now? A patrolling Yudo soldier asked his comrade beside him. The sound of the wind. His comrade replied indifferently. What, after staying outside the Runda city for so long? Even you have become as timid as the Dawei people. The Yudo soldier did not answer. He only looked into the distance in confusion. Just now he seemed to have heard a faint cry. He looked around again and asked, "Aren't there fewer patrolling soldiers with torches?" The Yudo soldiers were all sleeping in their tents, while the patrolling soldiers stood guard outside. Even though the night rain had extinguished some of the torches, it was not enough to extinguish the people as well. He walked over and happened to walk in front of one of the tents. The wind rustled the wild grass outside the tent, bringing with it a strange smell. He was not unfamiliar with this smell. In fact, he was extremely familiar with it. Every day in the captive camp, in the village outside the Runda city, they had sensed this smell countless times. This was the smell of blood. The Yudo soldier was stunned. He stood in front of the tent, holding a torch. After hesitating for a moment, he walked in. The smell of blood in the tent was even thicker. Everyone was sprawled on the ground, seemingly in deep sleep. That is, if one ignored the large pool of blood on the ground. Men, there's enemy. The Da-Wei people have launched a sneak attack on the tents. The patrolling soldier had just shouted this when he saw a flash of a blade in the darkness. Immediately after, he felt a chill on his neck, and his body fell to the ground. The torch fell to the ground. He struggled to move his eyes, and he saw a ghost with a green face and fangs staring at him menacingly. The sound of a bugle horn echoed through the plains outside the Runda city, and countless Yudo soldiers were awakened from their dreams. The Da-Wei people have launched a sneak attack on the tents. The night and the wind covered the smell of blood. When everyone got up to check, they found that many of the Yudo soldiers in the tents had already been killed in their sleep. The blood flowed out of the tents and into the soil of the plains. Together with the rain, it watered the land of the Da-Wei. Huyate pulled out the long blade at his waist and said angrily, "The Da-Wei people dare to launch a sneak attack at night. The Yudo warriors will not let them return. Kill all the Da-Wei people for me." Murderous aura rose from all directions. The battle cries and shouts of battle could be heard from the tents. "Ghost! There's a ghost!" This was the scream of the Yudo. "Where's the ghost?" "It's the Da-Wei people." "No, it's a ghost." The black-clothed men surged out from all directions. Their faces were like malicious ghosts, and their expressions were savage. They silently appeared beside the Yudo and easily reaped their lives. The Yudo were originally savage and bloodthirsty, but when they saw the malicious ghosts in the night, their morale plummeted, and they immediately fell into chaos. Huyate shouted angrily, "What malicious ghosts? This is all a scheme of the Da-Wei people. Look clearly for this general, they are wearing masks. If anyone does not fight with all their strength and is afraid of the enemy, I will punish them according to military law and execute them all." Huyate's words were so powerful that the other Yudo soldiers did not dare to retreat. However, the fear in their hearts would not disappear just because of a few words. The masks made by the Runda craftsmen were extremely terrifying and sinister. They did not speak, and anyone who saw them would feel some fear. The Yudo soldiers were at a loss. On the other side, outside He-Yan's tent, everyone could already hear the sounds of chaos coming from outside. However, the Utopian soldiers guarding the provisions only had strange expressions. They did not move, instead becoming even more vigilant as they scanned their surroundings. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared. His movements were extremely fast, like a blur, and he wanted to approach the provisions. The Yudo soldiers immediately shouted, "Someone's coming." The sound of swords clashing rang out. Only then did the Yudo soldiers clearly see that the newcomer was a black-clothed man wearing a mask. But, only one person? A single person dares to burn the provisions. The Yudo soldiers laughed. Lord Huyate is right. These Da-Wei people are not only cowardly, but also very stupid. Yudo is not only barbaric, but also very talkative, the masked man in black mocked. "Archers, get ready. Turn him into a hedgehog." Countless arrows rained down from behind. The granary had the most Yudo guarding it, and no matter what happened outside, these people would not leave. This was because from a certain perspective, the provisions were the key to victory for the Yudo without losing a single soldier. Attacking a city was naturally more difficult than defending it. If they fought head-on, although they could win, there would still be casualties. It was better to slowly wear down the Rundu. When the majority of the people in the city had starved to death, and the Runda soldiers no longer had the strength to fight, breaking through the city would be as easy as cutting through tofu. Thus, Huyate also knew that the provisions could not be allowed for the slightest mistake. The rain of arrows was dense, but the black-clothed man used his sword to block them. His swordsmanship was exceptionally good, and under the night rain and the light of the torches, he was so fast that it was difficult to see clearly. All that could be seen was a black shadow fighting. In a flash, the corpses of Yudo were all around him. Huang Xiong and the others who were hiding in the bushes were stunned. When He Yan was in the Liang province guards, they already knew that he was proficient in sabers, horses, bows and arrows. Even the whip and spear were not a problem, but they had never seen him use a sword. Jiang Jiao had once asked about it, but He Yan only said, "My swordsmanship is not good, and it is not easy to use, so I will not embarrass myself. When using a weapon, of course I will use the one I am most proficient in." Tonight He Yan took away Li Kuang's sword. They all thought that He Yan had no choice but to disguise himself as General Fei Hong. But now, they saw that his swordsmanship was exquisite, and they were afraid that he was not inferior to the real General Fei Hong. In the past he was too humble, and was unwilling to show his true skills. No wonder he dared to attack the enemy camp alone, and set fire to the provisions. The rain of arrows around her could not do anything. "General, someone is making a move near the granary." Hu Yate's trusted aide shouted. Hu Yate stabbed his saber into the chest of a masked man in front of him. He suddenly pulled it out, and the saber was pulled back with a trail of blood. That man collapsed, and the mask on his face fell to the ground. Hu Yate stepped on it, and viciously crushed the mask to the ground. He turned around and walked towards the granary sneering. "Overestimating yourself." When he reached the tent near the granary, he saw that there were Yudo soldiers everywhere, and in the center was a black-clothed man holding a sword. His sword was like a rainbow, and although he was alone he had the aura of 100,000 soldiers. The rain of black arrows around him could not even touch the corner of his clothes. And wherever his sword pointed, the Yudo fell one after another. Hu Yate immediately stopped in his tracks. Several Yudo rushed forward, but the black-clothed man's sword easily brushed past them like a snake. With a turn and a turn, several people fell in front of him. Blood splattered on his silver mask, and then washed away by the drizzle of the night. The endless sharpness and scalding heat, his killing intent awe-inspiring. Hu Yate's mind went blank. "Who are you?" The masked man looked over. His eyes were very beautiful and bright, causing one to feel a chill. But his voice was calm, and could even be called gentle. "Jade people walk on the snow, flying gracefully through the clouds." The black-clothed man tilted his head and looked at him. "I thought that my name was known by everyone in the world." Chapter 175. Jade people glide through the snow, flying gracefully through the clouds. The black-clothed man tilted his head and looked at him. "And here I thought that everyone in the world knew my name. General Fei Hong? Hiru Fei?" Hu Yate was shocked and blurted out, "Impossible." "Why is it impossible?" The eyes under the mask stared at him. The corners of his mouth curled up in a mocking smile. "Why is it impossible?" Hu Yate was the bravest general of the Utopia, but at this moment he subconsciously retreated as he yelled, "Charge! Kill this person, and the king will reward you handsomely." Countless arrows and silhouettes rushed up, but the masked man easily dodged every blade and arrow that rushed towards him. He was like a swan flying through the snow, spreading his wings to create a world of his own. There was nothing that could trap him. His sword was even more invincible. It danced and circled around in the night sky, as if it could even cut through the drizzle. Hu Yate could not help but believe one thing. This was indeed General Fei Hong Hiru Fei. In the world, other than Hiru Fei, no one else had such exquisite swordsmanship. Hu Yate had never fought Hiru Fei before, but he had heard from the defeated Western Chang soldiers that Hiru Fei's azure gem sword could cut through all obstacles. But why would Hiru Fei appear here? He clearly could not be like this. Could this be another scheme of the Dawei? Hiru Fei had tricked them? These cunning and despicable Dawei people. "I want to kill him," Hu Yate said hatefully. He shouted to the people beside him, "Bring me my bow and arrows." He wanted to personally kill this bird that could still fly. He wanted to see this swan fall from the sky, fall to the ground, and be trampled into the mud by him. The bow and arrows were handed to him, and he aimed at the black-clothed man who was surrounded by the Utopia soldiers. He could not aim at the target no matter how hard he tried. He roared, "Idiots, back off a little." As soon as he finished speaking, the arrow in his hand was released. However, from the depths of the shrubs, A few more arrows were shot out, blocking his arrow in the middle. There's an accomplice. Catch them. At this moment, another man wearing a devil mask jumped out from the bushes. He laughed and threw a bucket-like object in the direction of the black-clothed man. The sword-wielding man in black only managed to grab the wooden barrel in midair, but the arrows of the Yuchuo soldiers had already arrived. General Fei Hong moved so quickly that no one could see him clearly. He only used the wooden barrel to block his eyes like an iron shield. When the arrow hit the wooden barrel that he used as a shield, something like water flowed out. Huyate immediately cried out in his heart when he saw this and said, "Stop! Everyone stop!" But even if the archer stopped immediately, the arrow that was shot out could not be returned. In the blink of an eye, the wooden barrel in General Fei Hong's hands had already been shot into a sieve. The water spurted out from within and sprayed over the entire supply camp. Immediately after, they heard her whistle. The sound was clear and melodious. From the bushes, from all directions in the darkness, dozens and hundreds of arrows suddenly shot out. The arrows carried fire and fell on the ointment sprinkled on the pile of fodder. With a boom, the fire soared to the sky. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. He had done something like setting fire not long ago in Jiang, so Hien was already very familiar with it. Huyate was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He only ordered the soldiers to put out the fire and kill the people. However, this was not Jiang, and rivers were not everywhere. The place where the camp was set up was not far from the river, but it was definitely not close either. Hien was slightly relieved. These ointments were the last of the ointments used to make fireworks in the Rundu. Although it was raining tonight, the rain was not heavy. However, the wind was very strong. As long as the wind blew, there was no need to worry about the fire not rising. In the end, these tents would be in danger. Now, Hien shouted, "Don't retreat, fight." The sounds of fighting and the flames from all directions rang out. Huyate looked around. The appearance of De Wei wearing devil masks from all directions had already caused the Yuchuo soldiers to panic and their morale to be unstable. Now that the rations were burning, some people were busy getting water to put out the fire. Not to mention the formation, even the pace of killing the De Wei was disrupted. Huyate was so angry that he almost vomited blood. All of this was because of Hirufei. Hirufei. He looked around and did not see Hirufei's shadow. His heart trembled as he shouted angrily, "Catch Hirufei for me. I want to personally cut off his head." In the camp, the soft cries of women could be heard. Suddenly, the tent flap was opened, and two devil-like faces appeared in the tent. The women let out a short, "Ah," but before they could say anything, their mouths were covered by one of the men. That man took off his mask, revealing a fierce face with a scar. However, it was not the face of Yudo. He said impatiently, "We are De Wei's men. We are here to save you. Put on your clothes and leave quickly." The women in the tent were all disheveled. Two of them had already fallen to the ground and were no longer breathing. Jiang Jiao looked at them and sighed in his heart. When they arrived, Huyate was causing trouble inside, doing some beastly things to the female Runda prisoners. Hien could not delay the burning of the rations, so he left. However, he did not let it go. Once the rations were burned, he asked the two of them to come and take a look. At first, he thought that Hien was too soft-hearted. Now that he saw the miserable corpses in the camp, even a bandit like Wang Ba could not bear it. He could not help but clench his fists and curse Yudo for being worse than a beast. The women quietly followed Wang Ba and Huyate out of the tent. The Yudo soldiers were all gathered at the rations, so no one noticed them. Jiang Jiao asked, "Can brother he hold on for that long?" Wang Ba sneered, "He is much better at being a hero than you and me. He went to save the other prisoners." The De Wei prisoners' tents were small and tattered. They could barely shelter them from the wind and rain. Dozens of women were squeezed together, their clothes barely covering their bodies. All of them looked miserable, and the tent was filled with the smell of blood and decay. It was nauseating. Every time the Wutua people ravaged these women, the dead ones would be thrown into the river, and the living ones would be thrown back with scars all over their bodies. After a few days, they would experience a life worse than death until they died. When they suddenly saw someone come to save them, these women could not believe their eyes. "Let's go," Hien said. "I will save you all." The leader of the women trembled as she asked, "Warrior, what is your name? Are you General Fei Hong?" The masked man did not move, but after a moment he took off his mask, revealing a handsome young face. His voice was calm. "No, my name is Hien Wuenlang, personally appointed by His Majesty." The rhythm of the Utho soldiers was completely disrupted. The masked away soldiers did not continue fighting. When they saw that the rations were about to be burned, they turned around and rushed towards the city gate. On top of the city gate, there were already ropes hanging down. Countless archers were lying in ambush on top of the city gate. Once the Udo soldiers got close, they would use the arrows they borrowed from the Udo a few days ago to kill them. The Udo could not get close, but the masked men were able to escape unscathed. They took the captives away. Someone shouted. Huyate flew into a rage. "A bunch of trash. Can't even keep an eye on the women." The Udo soldiers also felt wronged. Who would have thought that at a time of life and death, there would be people who would pay attention to these worthless women? They were just spoils of war for the enemy and would only drag them down. If they were in Udo, even if they were saved, they would still be killed. Women who had been defiled by the enemy had no right to live in this world. It would be fine if the captives wished to die in the enemy's camp, but who would have thought that there would be people who would use all sorts of methods to save these women? The subordinate hesitantly said, "I heard that General Fei Hong Hirufei never hurts women. If someone kidnaps Dewey's women, as long as he is there, he will save them." Huyate kicked him back. "Bastard. I've said it before, how could Hirufei come to the Rundu?" The smell of burning food came from the wilderness. From time to time, Udo soldiers would carry buckets of water to water them, but the wind and fire were strong, so it was futile. Huyate looked in the direction of the Rundu's city gate. Countless archers were lying in ambush on top of the city gate. From time to time, arrows with torches would be fired in this direction as a warning. His face darkened, and he gritted his teeth. "Rundu. I will flatten the Rundu. I will destroy the Rundu, young and old." Hien was the last one to go up the city gate. In order to protect the women, she had to first pull the rope back. She had to deal with the Udo soldiers at the city gate until she had the chance to return to the city. Even though the archers used arrows to force the Udo back off, she was still injured. When there was war, there would be sacrifices. It was already good enough that she was still alive. The women who were lucky enough to escape from the enemy camp sat on the city gate in a daze, until they could no longer hear the sound of the Udo's horn. Only then did they come back to their senses. Slowly, they covered their faces with their hands and began to cry. The Rundu soldiers behind the city gate had already taken off their masks. After a night of surprise attack, everything was tense. Only now did they seem to understand what really happened. Some of them were crying, while others were laughing and shouting. "We burned their provisions. Those Udo were beaten into idiots by us. Ha ha ha, we won against the Udo." To say that they won was naturally an exaggeration. However, this night attack was indeed a victory, and it was a complete victory. The number of Udo casualties was unknown. Hien had brought 500 elite soldiers, but 46 were sacrificed, and 273 were injured. For the Rundu soldiers who had been guarding the city for more than a month, this was already the best situation. Li Kuang looked at the elite soldiers who were lying on the ground in disbelief and muttered, "They actually did it." When Hien brought these people, Li Kuang actually did not approve of it. He was almost prepared for Hien and these hundreds of people to die. They were just sending themselves to death. As for burning the Udo's food, Li Kuang also thought that it was very unlikely. However, these things that were impossible in his eyes had now become reality. They even brought back the captives that the Udo captured outside the city. Li Kuang's heart suddenly lit up with new hope. All along he did not think that the Rundu soldiers could compete with the Udo. He thought that they could only defend the city gate and wait for reinforcements. But now Hien made him see another possibility. What if the Udo could not hold on? Without food, the Udo would not be able to hold on for long. Their advantage would no longer exist. Now they were only relying on their advantage in numbers. As for numbers, didn't that young Muanlang Hien already win 2 battles with fewer people? Thinking about this, Li Kuang looked at Hien excitedly. He saw that the young man was leaning against the wall of the building. He did not have time to take off his mask, and was looking at the rescued women who were crying together. Li Kuang could not see He Yan's expression, but he could see the smile at the corner of his mouth. He was very relieved. In an instant, the scene in front of Li Kuang overlapped with the scene in the past. He still vaguely remembered the time when he fought a battle with He Rufei, who was still a deputy general. That person was also like this. He sat quietly on the ground and looked at the crying and laughing soldiers. The sharpness on the battlefield was restrained, and he was incredibly gentle. He really looked like He Rufei. Li Kuang thought silently. To be more precise, he looked like He Rufei in the past. He Rufei in the past. How are you? Li Kuang walked over. He Yan raised his head and looked at him. The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm okay. Just a little tired. He and the elite soldiers did not rest for the whole night. Li Kuang said, rest for a while. He Yan nodded and stood up. He thought of something and said to Li Kuang, Lord Li, please ask people to find out if these rescued women still have family in the city. If they do, please ask them to bring them home. If they don't have family, please help them settle down. Li Kuang frowned slightly and did not say anything. He Yan seemed to know what he was thinking. He said lightly, no matter what Lord Li thinks, they are still Dawei's citizens and Runda's citizens. Since you are the commander of the city, you can't sit back and do nothing. The responsibility of the people on the battlefield is to protect the citizens of every inch of the country. It doesn't matter if they are rich or poor, or what they have encountered. She stared at Li Kuang, as if insisting that Li Kuang give her an answer. Li Kuang paused and said, I understand. He Yan nodded to him. Thank you. She went down the gate tower without saying anything. He Yan lived in the residence arranged by Zhao Shiming. She was now Muan Lang, so she could use Muan Lang's privilege to live in a room alone. She asked the servants in the residence for a basin of hot water, and went into the house. The servants quickly brought the hot water in. He Yan locked the door, took off her mask and pulled down her clothes. Her back, shoulders and arms were all injured. Some were grazed by swords, and some were from arrows. Last night, she was at the front line and burned the Yudo's provisions. Hundreds of arrows were fired at her, so it was impossible for her to escape unscathed. But now she was already in good condition. She soaked the handkerchief in hot water and wiped her wounds. The wounds on her back and shoulders were the deepest, but the wounds on her waist were not as bad. Thanks to Lin Shuanghe's scar removal and muscle revitalization ointment. This time, she brought the remaining scar removal and muscle revitalization ointment with her to the Rundu. The wounds on her shoulders and waist were almost used up, and there was no more ointment left in the box. After changing into clean clothes, she looked at herself in the mirror. The youth in the mirror had a pale face. The biggest advantage of the mask and black clothes was that the soldiers couldn't see the bloodstains and wounds. They also couldn't see her face clearly. She was always in high spirits, always moving forward, and always being the one who boosted the morale of the soldiers. Ian looked at her arm. Her sleeve was half rolled up, and there was a knife wound on her arm. However, she had already used up all the medicinal powder she brought with her. Just as she was about to wrap the wound with a white cloth, someone knocked on the door. It was a woman's voice. Xiaohe official. Ian said, "Please come in." The person who came in was a young and beautiful girl. She had a smile on her face, and there was a small dimple on her left cheek, which made her charming and lively. She walked over and handed He-Yin a round bottle. She smiled and said, "I saw Xiaohe official asking for hot water when you came in. I reckon that Xiaohe official is injured. This is the leftover wound ointment that master usually uses. This concubine brought it over." Her gaze landed on the scar on He-Yan's arm. "Ah!" she exclaimed. "Xiaohe Darren, are you really injured?" He-Yan smiled. "It's just a small injury. It's nothing." "That won't do." The girl came forward as if they were close friends. She wanted to get closer, but she seemed to be aware of her special status and didn't dare to get too close. She stood to the side and comforted. "If you don't treat a small injury, it will drag on and become a big injury. My master is like this. Sometimes when he gets injured on the battlefield, he can't be bothered to treat it. When it becomes an old injury, it will be difficult for him to recover." He-Yan looked at her young and beautiful face, and her heart was filled with emotions. She knew this girl. This girl was Li Kuang's favorite concubine. Her name was Iluo. When she and Li Kuang fought against the Western Chang people, Iluo was very familiar with her. It was because this girl was exceptionally clever and knew how to please Li Kuang. At that time, Hien thought that if she was a man, she would also dote on this kind of girl wholeheartedly. At that time, Iluo was only 16 years old. She was very young and her face was round. 3 or 4 years later, she grew up a little. Her childishness dissipated and her round face became an oval face. Only the dimple on her left cheek and this sweet smile remained unchanged. Xiaohe official, why are you looking at me? Iluo touched her face. Her eyes turned and she said crisply, I'm beautiful. My family's master dotes on me the most. Hien couldn't help but laugh. Iluo loved to boast about this in the past, and she still loved to boast about this now. This sentence made her feel as if she had returned to the past. What are you laughing at? Iluo asked. Am I ugly? No. Hien waved his hand. I just remembered some things from the past. At that time, Iluo was too cute and clever. Hien couldn't help but think of her as his own little sister. He was her biological little sister, but because of the complicated relationship between the He family, He wasn't close to her. At that time, Iluo was beautiful and clever. He felt that Iluo wasn't worth it. If this kind of girl was to get married, she should find a young man who was similar in appearance to her. As for Li Kuang, it wasn't that Hien didn't like this colleague of his. It was just that Li Kuang was old enough to be Iluo's father. He was serious and straightforward, and he wasn't considerate. He didn't know what Iluo saw in him. At that time, Iluo held her cheeks and giggled. She said to Hien, everyone in my family is a servant. Deputy General, he is a talented and handsome young man. How could he marry a servant as his wife? If I marry another servant, I'll give birth to a child who will still be a servant in the future. As a servant, I'll have to depend on the master. If I accidentally annoy the master, I'll lose my life. What's so good about that? It's better to follow master. I'll eat my fill and wear warm clothes. I only need to please master, and I won't be afraid of others bullying me. What you said is false. I'll just treat this as a job. Being master's concubine is easier than doing the jobs you mentioned. Moreover, master is a straightforward person and doesn't like to beat around the bush. I won't have to scheme against him. It's very good. Deputy General you and master are both people who protect the people of Dawei. You're both heroes. If I become master's concubine, I'll be a hero's woman. I don't think there's anything bad about this. I'm living a much better life than before. I don't have many wishes in this life. I just hope that 10 years from now, I'll still be master's favorite concubine. I hope that 10 years from now, I won't grow old and no other vixens will steal master's favor and pity from me. If that's the case, I'll be very grateful to Guanyin Nyang. Hien felt at that time that this girl was quite insightful. Everyone had their own thoughts. Iluo was happy as long as she was happy. Looking at it now, 10 years was unknown. However, 3 years had passed. It seemed like she was still Li Kuang's favorite concubine. He even brought her with him to the rendu. She lowered her head and smiled. She sprinkled the medicinal powder that Iluo brought onto the wound on her arm. Iluo looked curiously and couldn't help but ask, Xiaohe official, you don't look old. Why are you like my master? You didn't make a sound when you applied the medicine? Don't tell me that you warriors who fight don't know pain? It's not that it doesn't hurt. Hien said. I think that when your master applied the medicine, it should be very painful. It's just that he didn't want to cry out in front of you. Iluo laughed. Xiaohe official, your words are really interesting. Hien finished applying the medicinal powder and returned the bottle to Iluo saying, Miss Iluo, thank you for the medicine. Iluo took the bottle and didn't leave immediately. She looked at Hien and said, Xiaohe official, it's just some medicine. You don't have to thank me. I should be the one thanking you. What are you thanking me for? Thank you for coming up with a brilliant plan last night to burn the Yudo's provisions and help us vent our anger. Also, thank you for saving those women. She lowered her head and smiled helplessly. I know those women who were kidnapped by the Yudo. If it wasn't for you last night, they wouldn't have been able to return to the rendu alive. No one would care about their lives. Even if my master personally led the troops, he wouldn't care about their lives. However, you are different. She looked at He Yan with sparkling eyes. You brought them back and didn't leave out any of them. I originally thought that how could there be such a young official who was appointed by His Majesty? You must have taken advantage of me on the battlefield. Now I don't think so. You are different from them. You are a good person, a true hero. Chapter 176. He Yan smiled and looked at her. Is it because I saved those captives that I'm a true hero? A true hero will see things that others can't. There are many men who speak up for men, and there are many women who speak up for women, Iluo said. But there aren't many men who will speak up for women. He Yan looked at her serious expression and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. But she wasn't a real man, so she couldn't really give Iluo what she wanted. This was the way of the world. It wasn't something that could be changed in a short period of time. Seeing that He Yan was silent, Iluo took the opportunity to say, Lord Xiaohe, after you left last night, many aunties in the city came to ask me about you. The county magistrate's wife also asked about you. They all said that if you could come back alive, they would like to tell you about their daughter. She doesn't have to marry you. She can be your concubine. He Yan couldn't react in time. Facing Iluo's hopeful gaze, He Yan could only use his usual excuse. Thank you for your love, but I already have a sweetheart. You already have a sweetheart? Iluo was a little disappointed, but soon became curious. Who is Lord Xiaohe's sweetheart? Is she beautiful? What kind of person is she? He Yan's mouth curved into a smile. Yes, she is very beautiful. Her temperament seems very cold, but she is a very gentle person. This young man had always looked calm and gentle, but at this moment, he really showed the shyness and nervousness of a young man his age. Iluo was even more curious. From what you said, this girl should be very outstanding. Then does she like you? He Yan was stunned and shook his head. She doesn't like me? Iluo was shocked. Xiaohe is skilled, handsome, and kind-hearted. Furthermore, he was personally conferred the title of Muan Lang by His Majesty. Why is he not fond of such a person? He Yan shrugged. Because he's good, and there are people better than me around him. And I have my own things to do, so I don't want to implicate others. Beautiful Silk looked at him and giggled. Lord Xiaohe, you're good at everything, but this is the only bad thing about you. As long as your sweetheart isn't married yet, it means that things aren't set in stone yet. Then snatch. Back then, when Master wanted to pick a concubine, there were dozens of sisters in our courtyard. Every day, I would appear in front of Master, and every day, I would dress up meticulously. This concubine was the one who fought for the position of Master's favorite concubine. If Lord Xiaohe really likes that lady, then don't bother about anything else. Someone better than you might have a higher status than you, but she just had to lose to you. Honest women are afraid of pestering men. If you pester her day and night, who knows when that lady might fall in love with you? He Yan didn't expect to hear the phrase, honest women are afraid of pestering men here. He thought of Jiang's anxiousness at that time and secretly laughed. Iluo seemed to be very enthusiastic about helping her to win her sweetheart's favor, and wanted to talk endlessly. He Yan could only stop her. Miss Iluo, thank you for your good intentions, but right now we can't even protect ourselves. If the Rundu can be defended and the Yudo chased back, I will definitely do as you say. But right now, let's forget about it. Hearing this, Iluo also sighed and said, That's true. She suddenly fell silent and looked gloomy. He Yan felt a little apologetic. This lady was still in high spirits when she came, but after hearing his words, she became so sad. When he thought of this, he took out an apricot from his bag and handed it over. Don't worry, we will definitely defend this place. When Iluo saw the apricot in He Yan's hand, she was startled at first, but then she happily took it. Lord Xiaohe, why do you still have candies? I casually grabbed them when we set off from the Liang province guards. He Yan scratched his head. When they left Jiang, Cui Yuezhi grabbed a lot of Jiang's specialty candied fruits for her. Xiaoju didn't like to eat these, so she moved all of them to He Yan's room. When they left, they mostly brought dry biscuits and dry rations. They didn't bring many snacks like these, but He Yan still picked some up, thinking that they wouldn't take up much space anyway. Yi Luo carefully licked the apricot and happily said to Hien, "Thank you, Lord Xiaohe. Ever since the Yudo came, this concubine has been starving and full. I don't even have rice to eat, let alone candies. I don't even dare to think about it. Now that I have received Lord Xiaohe's blessing, I'm really happy." Hien said, "You don't even have rice to eat? It can't be right? The Yudo besieged the Rundu for only a little over a month. How can the city be in such a state?" Ever since she came to the Rundu, she and Wang Ba had been eating the dry rations that they brought from the Liang province guards. She knew that the Runda's rations were tight, but that was because they had to be used by the soldiers guarding the city. These few days, she was so busy that she didn't even have time to stroll around the city. If Yi Luo hadn't said it herself, Hien wouldn't have known that the Rundu was so tense. One had to know that even Yi Luo didn't have enough to eat, let alone the common people. Yi Luo bit the apricot and looked at her with wide eyes. "Lord Xiaohe, you don't know. The Yudo soldiers besieged the Rundu for more than a month, but last year, there was a snowstorm in the Rundu. After the snowstorm, there was a famine. Even if the Yudo didn't come, the common people in the Rundu would have had a hard time. Not to mention that the roads out of the city are blocked. There wasn't much food in the city to begin with, and all of it was given to the soldiers. The common people have long been starving to the point of eating grass and tree roots. A few days ago, there were already people who died of starvation." "What?" Hien suddenly sat up. "Is this true? I wouldn't dare to lie to Lord Xiaohe," Yi Luo said. "Otherwise our Rundu is rich in grapes. Why would Lord Xiaohe only give Lord Xiaohe a bowl of grapes on the first day you came? It's really, that was the last bowl of grapes in the Rundu." The famine in the city was a big deal, but Li Kuang didn't even tell her about such a serious matter. If that was the case, there was no point in defending the city. Li Kuang was waiting for He Rufei, who wouldn't come. On the other hand, the common people of the Rundu were waiting for endless despair and hunger. They were waiting for death. Hien lowered his eyebrows and put on his shoes without saying a word. Yi Luo asked, "Lord Xiaohe, what do you want to do?" "I want to see Li Kuang." Li Kuang was checking yesterday's battle report in his room when he suddenly saw Hien striding in from outside. He was a little surprised and asked, "Didn't you go back to your room to rest? Why did you come out again?" Hien sat down on a chair at the side. She was indeed very tired and would feel better if she sat down. She looked at Li Kuang and said, "I'm here to ask, what are Lord Li's plans after we burned the Yudo's provisions last night?" Li Kuang looked at Hien and cupped his hands. He said sincerely, "Yesterday's victory was all thanks to Lord Xiaohe. Now that the Yudo has run out of provisions, I plan to continue waiting for reinforcements. The Yudo will definitely be more anxious than us. If they attack the city by force, we can set a trap. What do you think, Lord Xiaohe?" Hien said, "I don't think it's appropriate." Li Kuang frowned. "Why?" Hien stared into his eyes. "Lord Li intends to enter a stalemate with the Yudo. This is not wrong, but how long can the people in the city last? I'm afraid that they will starve to death before reinforcements arrive. There is not much food left in the city, due to this year's snow disaster. Why did Lord Li hide this from me?" Li Kuang heard this and did not answer Hien. Instead he asked, "Who told you this? There are so many people in the Rundu. Does Lord Li think he can hide it?" Hien's eyes were sharp. Even if he can hide it from one person, how can he not know when more and more people starve to death? Last night, when she led the 500 elite soldiers of the Rundu out of the city, she felt that the soldiers of the Rundu were thin and weak. But at that time, she only thought that it was the result of defending the city for days. She only understood when Yi Luo told her the reason. If the army was already like this, it was a big taboo in war. Defending the city until the people in the city starved to death was not something that had never been written in history books. That was hell on earth. She did not even dare to think about it. Li Kuang was silent for a while. Then he asked Hien, "What do you mean?" "We can't continue to defend the city. My lord and I will lead the Runda soldiers and fight to the death with the Yudo outside the city." "Impossible," Li Kuang answered without thinking. "Taking the initiative to attack is the worst plan. We already took the initiative to attack last night. Last night, we had 500 elite soldiers. But the Rundu has 30,000 soldiers. This is the last hope of the Rundu. If we do as you said and fight to the death with the Yudo, the city will fall and all the people in the city will fall into the hands of the Yudo. Brother, he and the Yudo have fought twice. It's impossible that you don't know how cruel and vicious the Yudo are. These people will suffer a fate worse than death if they fall into their hands. I'm the commander of the Rundu. Even if all the people in the Rundu starve to death, it's still better than dying under the torture of the Yudo. Who said that we will definitely lose? Yen frowned. The war hasn't started yet. Anything can happen. We can also be the victorious side. 30,000 against 100,000, how can we win? Yen said, in the Battle of Jiang, didn't we also win with fewer people? Li Kuang turned around and said coldly, I'm not the commander-in-chief of the right army. You're also not General Fei Hong. We can't win this kind of battle with fewer people. But I can win. Li Kuang turned around and looked at her, as if he was looking at a child who didn't know how high the sky was. He shook his head and said, Brother He, I admit that you're somewhat powerful. You also have a way to deal with the Yudo. But war is very cruel. It's a matter of the lives of the people in the city. I can't use the lives of the people in the city to earn your military merits. It's fine if we die. After all, we only have one life. But the city gate cannot be broken. I won't take the initiative to fight the Yudo. If they want to attack the city, we will defend. If they are in a stalemate, we will wait for reinforcements to arrive. Li Kuang was like this in the past. He was very conservative when he fought. Yan also knew this very well. But at that time, she was only a deputy general who led tens of thousands of Fuyue army. Now this is the Rundu. Even if Sir He is Muan Lang, without my permission, you can't order the Rundu's troops. So don't waste your energy. Li Kuang said coldly. Yan took a deep breath. This Shirtu's temper was bad and stubborn. Even after so many years, it still hasn't changed. She asked, fine. If we do as Lord Li said and don't attack but retreat to defend, but there is no food in the city, sooner or later everyone will starve to death. You and I both know the situation of the Rundu's troops. If this continues, even if the people don't starve to death, the troops will starve to death. For the Yudo, if so many Rundu's troops die without sacrificing a single soldier, won't it be too easy for them? The troops won't starve to death. Li Kuang's face darkened. I have my own way. Yan asked, what's your way? Li Kuang looked at her and said, you don't need to know. After that, he ignored Yan and walked into the inner room. Yan looked at his back and felt uneasy. Food was not a problem that could be easily solved, but Li Kuang seemed to have a plan. Could it be that there was a secret granary in the Rundu city? But if there was such a granary, how could the Rundu's troops and the Rundu's people suffer from hunger? Yan shook her head and planned to discuss with Jiang Jiao and his men. As soon as she walked out of the door, she bumped into someone. It was the Rundu's county magistrate Zhao Shiming. Zhao Shiming awkwardly wiped the sweat off his forehead. He looked into the room and said, I wanted to go in. But when I reached the door, I heard you and Lord Li quarreling, so I couldn't go in. He looked at Yan's face and comforted her. Xiaohe, Lord Xiaohe, please don't take Lord Li's words to heart. He has such a temper. He is as stubborn as a Shirtu. He has a good heart, but he doesn't dare to gamble with the lives of the Rundu's people. Lord Xiaohe, you came from Liangzhou, so you might not know. We people in the Rundu really don't dare to take this risk. I'm not angry. Yan sighed and said, I just think it's inappropriate. She looked at Zhao Shiming again. Zhao Shiming was the one who hired craftsmen to make the scarecrows and masks. Zhao Shiming, the county magistrate, seemed to be very popular in the Rundu. Now that Li Kuang was dissatisfied with her, Yan couldn't ask Li Kuang for help. Jiang Jiao and his men had always been by her side, so they couldn't be separated. This Zhao Shiming should have people around him who could be useful, although there weren't many. Lord Zhao. She thought for a moment and bowed deeply to Zhao Shiming. I have something I need your help with. Zhao Shiming was startled and said, Lord Xiaohe, please speak your mind. Lord Zhao, do you have people around you who can be used? For example, bodyguards. I want to borrow 2 of them and do something for me. After a pause, she continued. However, this matter needs to be hidden from Lord Li. He can't know about it. Zhao Shiming looked at the young man in front of him. Whether it was for public or private reasons, he had spent more time with Li Kuang, so he shouldn't help He Yan hide this from Li Kuang. But on the other hand, he believed that this young man didn't have any bad intentions. In fact, he was one of the purest people in the world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to take the risk last night to rescue those women from the enemy's camp. Zhao Shiming didn't have to think for long before he said, "No problem." The sky in the Rundu was gloomy, as if the sun hadn't shone for a long time. The entire city was filled with a rotten and old aura. Two naked boys pushed a corpse out of a house. This corpse was their grandfather, who was placed on a straw mat. His entire body was so thin that every bone in his body could be seen clearly. He had been starved to death. This kind of thing wasn't rare in the Rundu recently. Ying Xiang walked past them and looked at them with a trace of pity in her eyes. They didn't have much food left. "Fourth young master, if we stay in the Rundu forever, we will also become like this." She reminded him softly. Chu Zhao didn't say anything and just quietly walked forward. Prime Minister Su's people had already left the Rundu long ago. Staying here was the same as waiting for death. No one would take the initiative to enter this city that was bound to fall. Prime Minister Su's people couldn't be found here. Even if he was the fourth young master of the Chu family, when the day came, there wouldn't be any difference. Death was an extremely fair thing. It wouldn't be merciful for a moment just because of one's status. Ying Xiang still wanted to say something. "Let's wait a little longer." Chu Zhao interrupted her. "Wait. What were they waiting for?" Ying Xiang was silent for a moment before she asked, "Fourth young master, if you are really worried about Miss He, why don't you take her with you?" She didn't even inform Xiao Huijin. She traveled thousands of miles to the Rundu alone, just to save the people in the Rundu. Why do you think that she would abandon the people in the city and go with me? Chu Zhao smiled. He Yan was a person. If everything was settled, she would probably leave quietly. The more dangerous the situation was, the more impossible it was for her to leave alone. He thought that this was stupid, but sometimes he couldn't help but want to continue watching. He wanted to see what kind of shocking things this girl could do, and how far she could go. Ying Xiang lowered her head as she walked. Her voice was soft. "Fourth young master, you can't let go of her?" Chu Zhao smiled faintly. "I just don't want to see her die so easily. If she was alive, there would probably be more interesting things in the world. If she was dead, there would only be one kind of woman in the world." As they were talking, Ying Xiang suddenly said, "Fourth young master, Miss He." Chu Zhao followed her gaze and saw He Yan standing at the end of the street. She was looking at a house in a daze. There was a woman sitting at the door. She was digging in the soil, trying to dig out some edible grass and tree bark. She just stood there quietly. Her eyebrows were furrowed, making it impossible to see her expression clearly. Chu Zhao walked over and said, "Brother He." Only then did He Yan see the two of them. She replied, "Brother Chu, Miss Ying Xiang." Ying Xiang bowed. They walked forward together. Chu Zhao asked, "Brother He, you just had a fierce battle with Yudo last night. Why didn't you rest in your room?" "It's nothing. I just came out for a walk." He Yan replied. Ying Xiang asked, "Has young master He eaten? If not, I still have some dry food in my bag." She sighed. "The Rundu is like this now. We don't have any hot food." He Yan shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm not hungry." She really couldn't eat. Chu Zhao thought for a while and said, "Brother He, are you worried about the people in the Rundu? Is it because there's no food in the city?" He Yan looked at him. "Brother Chu, you know about it too? I came to the Rundu earlier than you." Chu Zhao shook his head and smiled. "I have plenty of time. All the people in the Rundu are the same. If Brother Chu can persuade Prime Minister Su." He Yan asked tentatively. He Yan had always been suspicious about Chu Zhao's identity. Although Chu Zhao was Prime Minister Su's student, he didn't seem to work directly with Prime Minister Su. Indeed, the reason why he was able to gain face in front of Chu Linfeng was because of Su Jingfu. However, Chu Zhao often made choices that were contrary to Su Jingfu's original intentions. For example, in Jiang, Chu Zhao sent the military defense map. He was a very opinionated person. It was best not to be enemies with such a person. As long as he didn't show any hostility, She could only be careful. Just like how Chu Zhao wanted to use her, if she could use Chu Zhao to get close to He Rufei, it wouldn't be a bad idea. After all, He Rufei was now crazy to the point of inhumanity. If He Yan wanted to be promoted under Xiaoju in the past, she had changed her mind a long time ago. She decided not to involve Xiaoju in this and stay away from Xiaoju. She would try her best to do this on her own. Chu Zhao's smile faded a little when he heard this. After a while he shook his head and said, "Brother He, I'm not omnipotent. Prime Minister Su won't listen to my advice." He sounded a little wronged when he said this. He Yan raised his eyebrows. The relationship between Su Jingfu and Chu Zhao seemed to be very meaningful. "I can't help the people of the Rundu. The only thing I can do is to accompany them. However, what does Brother He plan to do?" He looked at He Yan. "You know that the Rundu can't hold on for long. A city without food could only hold on desperately." Li Kuang didn't explain the situation to her immediately. Now that he was unwilling to confront the Yudo head-on, this path seemed to be a dead end. "Will you give up?" he asked. The man's gaze was gentle. It was like the warm wind in the capital during the third lunar month, but it also carried the coldness of spring. He was sober, but he was secretly looking forward to it. He Yan didn't avoid his gaze. She looked straight into his eyes. "Brother Chu, what do you want me to do?" Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. Instead he smiled. "Why are you still asking me?" He Yan slowly walked forward. "I thought that Brother Chu already had the answer in your heart." After a while his voice came from the side. "I've never seen anything that can stop Brother He's footsteps. I've also never seen anything that can make Brother He lose hope." "You think that I'm omnipotent?" Chu Zhao said. "That's not true. No matter how omnipotent Brother He is, you can't solve the Runda's current emergency, can you?" He Yan fell silent. Chu Zhao continued. "Brother He, do you know that in the past, when the famine was at its worst, the people in the city would even exchange children for food in order to survive? Cannibalism is an especially terrible thing. If the Rundu continues like this, that kind of situation might happen." He Yan lowered her head and chuckled softly. Then she looked into the distance. The streets were empty. The shops had already closed. Most of the edible things had already been found and eaten. It was clearly a lively summer day, but the Rundu looked barren. Even the trees on the roadside were bare. The leaves had already been plucked by the hungry people to fill their stomachs. If it wasn't for the hot sun, it wouldn't look like summer at all. It would look more like winter. This also didn't look like the Rundu in He Yan's memory. It was small and lively, the grapes were sparkling, and the wine was mellow. "The war changed everything," she said softly. "Do you know what's even more terrible than cannibalism?" Chu Zhao was a little surprised. "What is it?" He Yan didn't say anything. She just looked at the lifeless city. She felt powerless and sad. That kind of thing. If she could, she hoped that it wouldn't happen in her life. She didn't want to see it in her life. That was a real hell on earth. Chapter 177. He Yan didn't see Li Kuang for a few days. Li Kuang seemed to be deliberately avoiding him. He Yan couldn't find him, and his subordinates refused to tell He Yan where he was. He Yan blocked Li Kuang a few times, but Li Kuang didn't seem to want to talk to him. He Yan had no choice but to say, "Lord Li, before coming to the Rundu, I've already asked someone to ask for reinforcements. Moreover, I've also said that the Rundu's troops have a chance to fight against Yudo. Lord Li, why do you want to block your own path to a dead end?" This is the Rundu, not Liangzhou. Li Kuang's attitude was also very tough, and he wasn't moved by He Yan's words. "Although you're the Muan Lang personally appointed by His Majesty, you don't have enough power to order me around. Regarding the night attack on the enemy camp, I'm very grateful for your help, but that's it. Whatever I do after this, you don't have to interfere." He Yan looked at him carefully. When he first came to the Rundu, although Li Kuang had a worried expression, he was still a little angry. But now his expression was not right. His eyes were gloomy, as if he had made up his mind about something, and he was stubborn and unshakable. He Yan could tell that his mood was not good, and it wasn't only because of Yudo. "Lord Li, how do you plan to deal with the famine in the city?" He Yan looked at his back and asked. Li Kuang was shocked and said, "I've said it before, I have my own ways. This has nothing to do with you. He Yin walked in front of Li Kuang and looked him in the eyes. Lord Li, I'm not from the Rundu, but I'm very clear about the current situation. Things haven't reached the worst point yet. We've burned the provisions of the Wutong people once, so we can kill their soldiers next time. If Lord Li continues to hold on to the idea of mutual destruction, we won't be able to fight this war. This city can't be defended at all. Her words were a little too serious. Li Kuang's face was filled with anger. What do you know? I know that if Lord Li miscalculates the current situation, he will make the wrong decision. Li Kuang's eyes showed a little impatience. He tried his best to endure, but in the end he couldn't help but push He Yin away and said, I know what to do, I don't need you to tell me what to do. He strode out, not giving He Yin a chance to speak. He Yin frowned and stared at his back, the uneasiness in her heart growing stronger. She wasn't dealing with Li Kuang for the first time. Li Kuang's reaction was clearly that of someone who was at the end of the road. He Yin didn't want to believe in her other way, and He Yin couldn't convince him, so she couldn't command the Runda's troops. Even if she knocked Li Kuang unconscious, the Runda's soldiers wouldn't listen to her orders. Li Kuang had been leading these soldiers for too long. Perhaps because of this he wouldn't choose the risky decision that He Yin mentioned. She slowly walked out of the house with a heavy heart. In the past few days, even Zhao Shiming came out less and less. There was less and less food. It was fine if she didn't walk around with an empty stomach, but once she walked, she would feel even more hungry. She wished that she could turn everything into food and stuff it into her mouth. Quiet hadn't launched an attack on the Rundu yet. After that night's sneak attack and the burning of their provisions, Yudo probably wasn't as peaceful as it seemed on the surface. Quiet definitely wanted to attack the city immediately, but the existence of General Fei Hong made them a little afraid. But this fear would eventually dissipate, and Wyatt would eventually discover the truth. They only needed to send someone to Huayuan to find out that the Rundu was fake. The moment Wyatt found out that General Fei Hong was fake, they would immediately attack the Rundu. So these few days were actually the days that He Yin fought for the Runda's people. But Li Kuang was stubborn and conservative. As she walked, she bumped into Iluo. Compared to when He Yin first came to the Rundu, this girl looked a little thinner. Her originally egg-shaped face was now sharp from hunger, and she looked less sweet and more charming. But when she saw He Yin, she smiled and showed a familiar smile. Xiao He Yin. Miss Iluo. Did you quarrel with Master? Iluo pointed outside the door. I just saw Master angrily rush out. Xiao He Yin, please don't be angry with Master. Master's temper is a little straightforward, but he is a good person. If he offended Xiao He Yin, I will apologize to Xiao He Yin on behalf of Master. She was thinking of her master wholeheartedly. He Yin smiled bitterly and shook his head. It's fine, we just have some differences in opinion. Iluo nodded, not fully understanding. He Yin saw that she was holding something that looked like a garland of flowers in her hand, and felt a little strange. He asked, there are still flowers now? Most of the edible things in the Rundu had already been dug out by the hungry people. How could there still be flowers to make garlands of flowers? Iluo smiled and handed the garland to He Yin. He Yin took it and saw that the garland was very small and exquisite. He didn't know what kind of grass it was made of, but it was dotted with small purple flowers. He Yin went closer to smell it, but Iluo hurriedly stopped him. You can't smell it, Xiao He Yin. This flower is poisonous. He Yin, poisonous. It's heartbreak grass. The more beautiful it is, the more poisonous it is. Everyone in the Rundu knows this, so no matter how hungry they are, they won't pick it to eat. Otherwise, why would I use it to make garlands of flowers? She sighed again. No matter what, poisonous weeds always grow especially luxuriant. If only the crops in the fields could be like this. Seeing that He Yin didn't say anything, Iluo smiled and said, Xiao He Yin, are you interested in this garland of flowers? This concubine can teach Xiao He Yin how to make garlands of flowers. Perhaps you can give it to your sweetheart. Your sweetheart will be very happy. She was still thinking about He Yin's imaginary sweetheart. He Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought that if she made a garland of flowers and gave it to Xiao Ju would probably think that she was crazy and beat her to death. Forget it. He Yin shook his head. He doesn't like flowers and grass. I appreciate Miss Iluo's good intentions. Iluo was a little disappointed. She took the garland of flowers from He Yan's hands and said, "All right then. But how can there be no girls who like flowers and grass? When Master picked flowers for me, I was happy for a while." Lordly? He Yan thought. He didn't expect that with Li Kuang's fierce personality, he would pick flowers for his beloved concubine. That's right. Iluo nodded vigorously, as if she was afraid that He Yan didn't believe her. He picked them for me this morning. I made a garland of flowers while I was at it. He Yan's smile froze. Today? That's right. Iluo smiled. Recently, Master has been very good to me. She even forgot to say this concubine. She only cared about sharing her joy with He Yan. He promised that when the battle in the Rundu was over, he would give me a bigger house to live in. He also allowed me to plant plum blossom trees in the courtyard. Yesterday, he even saved some of his dried food for me to eat. As she spoke, Iluo's face became confused. Could it be that I've become prettier recently? Or is it because my deceased mother is protecting me from the heavens? Master is so obedient to me that I almost don't recognize him. He Yan's heart sank. That terrifying guess appeared in his mind again. He asked Iluo, "Other than this, has Lordly been acting strangely recently?" No. Iluo shook her head. Then she complained to He Yan, "However, Xiao He Darren, how can you say that he's acting strangely when he treats me well? Master was also very good to me in the past. Now he's just treating me better. It's probably a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now that I'm accompanying Master, Master must be moved." He Yan frowned and stepped forward. "Miss Iluo, it's best that you avoid Lordly for the next few days." "Why?" Iluo asked curiously. He Yan looked at her. The beautiful girl had grown up a lot. Her smile always carried a bit of fox-like craftiness. This made her look smart and quick-witted. She was very lovable, but her eyes still revealed her innocence. A charming beauty, a weak and powerless woman. "Perhaps Lordly will hurt you," He Yan said in a low voice. Iluo was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed. "Xiao He Darren, what do you mean? Master dotes on me too much. Why would he hurt me?" He Yan knew that she didn't believe him. In fact, women always thought that men were particularly affectionate. Little did they know that there was a prerequisite for that kind of affection. In times of peace and prosperity, a girl is naturally worthy of being doted on. He Yan's voice lowered. It was so low that almost no one could hear the pain in her voice. But in times of chaos, human lives are like grass. To Lordly, a girl is more important than a city in Rundu. "Iluo, I still don't understand." "It's okay if you don't understand." He Yan looked up at her. "Lordly is very busy all day. You shouldn't be alone with him for the next few days. When you have nothing to do during the day, you can go to other places. You can go find Lord Zhao or other people. In short, if you don't have to see Lordly, then don't see Lordly." Iluo looked at her strangely. This young Muan Lang's words were simply inexplicable. Why would someone advise her to distance herself from her master? If she didn't know that He Yan had led his elite troops to attack the enemy's camp a few days ago and save those captured women, Iluo would have suspected that this person was a bad person. She said, "Xiao He Darren, I am Master's concubine. It's impossible for me to not see Master. Wait until the battle in Rundu is over. You can see her however you want. But for now, stay away from her." The young man's eyes were very clear and very dark. When he stared at someone, it was very powerful. Iluo subconsciously nodded, but then she shook her head. He Yan also hesitated. She was now Muan Lang. No matter how suspicious and worried she was about Iluo, she couldn't keep someone else's concubine by her side. If she really did that, she was afraid that Li Kuang would feel that she had become the second Jiang Jiao. He might really kill Iluo. She said, "Go and find Lord Zhao's wife. You can stay with her during the day. If Lord Li suddenly wants to see you, you can ask someone to tell me. I will go with you." Iluo was a little suspicious, but He Yan was very insistent. In the end, she still agreed. After repeatedly reminding her, He Yan went to find Wang Ba and the others. On the night of the night attack, Wang Ba and the others were injured along with her. Shirtu and Jiang Jiao were fine. Wang Ba's leg was injured, but it wasn't too serious. Huang Xiong's wound was a little deeper. The wound on his left hand was very deep. Fortunately, it wasn't his right hand. Otherwise, he might not be able to hold a sword in the future. No matter what, they were still taking care of him. When they arrived at the house, Hong Shan and Huang Xiong were sleeping. Shirtu and Xiaomai had gone to help repair the weapons and shields. Only Jiang Jiao and Wang Ba were sitting by the door. When they saw He Yan, the two of them raised their heads. Jiang Jiao said, "Brother He, how is it?" He Yan shook her head. Wang Ba was furious. "What's wrong with that surnamed Li? He looks tall and strong, but why is he so timid? Has he been hiding in the city like a coward? I've been starving for the past few days. If this goes on, we'll all starve to death. We'll still be hungry ghosts when we go to hell. It's better to die while killing Yudo." Jiang Jiao said, "Lord Li is also afraid that the city will be destroyed and the people will be buried with him. It's just that." He looked at He Yan. "I've asked the soldiers here. They've run out of food. These days, we've been relying on the dry rations we brought from Liangzhou. Even this little bit of dry rations was eaten yesterday. We haven't eaten anything since yesterday. We can't go on like this." "That's right. In Rundu, even the rats have been dug out and eaten. There's not even a worm to be seen. Does he want us to eat the table? What is Li Kuang thinking? If we had known earlier, we wouldn't have been able to take the excess with us the day we burned the rations. We could have just grabbed a handful and carried it with us. It would have been enough to last us half a day." Jiang Jiao was both amused and angry. At that time, how could we care so much? "Brother He." He looked at He Yan. "Don't you have any other ideas? The Yudo's rations have been burned, but they're outside the city. They can still hunt and won't starve to death." He Yan was deeply worried. "If we're talking about who can last longer, the Runda's people definitely won't be able to last longer than the Yudo. Therefore Li Kuang's idea is definitely impossible. Now that he doesn't agree to go out of the city and confront the Yudo, I can't order the Runda's troops. I can only ask for external help, but..." However, she was afraid that before that day came, the Rundu would be in chaos. Li Kuang's attitude these days was very wrong. She sighed and didn't say anything else. On the other side, Iluo went to find Madame Zhao. Although He Yan's behavior was strange, Iluo always felt an indescribable sense of closeness towards He Yan. Therefore, although she didn't believe He Yan's words at all, she was still willing to do as He Yan said. Now that Li Kuang was very busy every day, he didn't have time to take care of her. She could go anywhere she wanted during the day. She had more freedom than before. Madame Zhao was holding her little grandson with a worried expression. Her daughter-in-law was seriously ill in bed. The doctor came several times, but it was useless. Everyone knew that this was an illness caused by starvation. Without food, of course, her body couldn't recover well. Madame Zhao was also hungry to the point of losing her shape. She was a good county magistrate's wife, but now her clothes were a lot bigger. Her exposed arms were so thin and weak that it seemed like they could be broken with a little force. Beautiful Silk thought to herself. In the past, the delicate young ladies in the city would complain about eating less every day. They looked thin and weak, which made people want to take pity on them. She was afraid that after the war, no one would think so anymore. The taste of hunger was really unbearable. A flower needed to drink enough dew before it could bloom for others to see. Madame Zhao only said a few words to Iluo before she closed her mouth. She looked listless. At this time, she was so hungry that she didn't even want to talk. Iluo sat with her for a while. Then, a soldier came over and said to Iluo, "Miss Iluo, the Lord is looking for you." "Looking for me?" Iluo was a little surprised. Li Kuang was busy with the Runda War. If she didn't take the initiative to look for Li Kuang definitely wouldn't take the initiative to look for her. However, thinking about how Li Kuang doted on her these few days, Iluo's heart was suddenly filled with joy. The only good thing about the Runda War was that Li Kuang saw her loyalty. Perhaps this doting could last for more than 3 years. It was very possible that it could last for 10 years. At this moment, she was only filled with the joy of fantasizing in her mind. He Yan's advice had long been thrown to the back of her mind. She happily lifted the corner of her skirt and said with a smile, Okay, I'll go see the Lord now. Luo followed the soldier into the house. Li Kuang wasn't alone in the house. Li Kuang's deputy soldiers and several officials in the Runda city were also sitting in the house. There were also a few confidants of Li Kuang. Luo felt a little strange. She originally thought that Li Kuang missed her and wanted to be affectionate with her. However, with so many people, it didn't seem like he wanted to be affectionate. Perhaps some important person was coming? She, the most beautiful girl in the Rundu, was going to fight for Li Kuang's face? But this didn't seem right. If there was an important person, why wasn't the county magistrate Zhao Shiming here? She walked forward and said, "Lord." Li Kuang's back was facing her. When he heard her voice, he turned around. These days he was haggard and looked a lot older. When he stood next to Luo, he really looked like Luo's father. In the past, the famous general of Dawei, General Fei Hong, also teased her like this. However, Luo didn't think much of it. Her own father had passed away early. Li Kuang gave her food, a house to live in and shelter. There were many biological fathers in the world who couldn't do this for their daughters. Moreover, Li Kuang was a hero who protected the people. She admired him and never felt that there was anything bad about him. At this moment her husband looked up at Luo. There was a deep meaning in his eyes that she couldn't understand. It seemed to be deep pain, but it also seemed to be mixed with coldness. After looking at her for a long time, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Luo, how long have you been following me?" Luo tilted her head and thought for a moment, replying to Lord, "This concubine has been following you for more than 3 years. After this summer, it will be 4 years." Li Kuang doted on her very much, so he took her with him everywhere he went. His wife and son were both in Shuajing, and they still had to take care of their parents. It was impossible for them to follow him to the bitter cold of the border. However, Luo, who looked young and beautiful, had been following him for many years without any complaints. In his life, he was straightforward. He didn't like women who schemed against each other. Luo had some harmless schemes, but more than that, it was a kind of pure passion. She was easily satisfied. She always had the word "fight for favor" written clearly on her face. She was very polite in her dealings with people. His colleagues all envied him for having such an understanding flower. In fact, Luo had never really enjoyed anything. As his beloved concubine, Luo's life couldn't be compared to the other women in the capital. Li Kuang muttered, "It's been 4 years." His tone was heavy. Luo inexplicably felt a little scared. She tilted her head to look at the people around her. The soldiers who were familiar with her in the past all turned their heads to avoid her gaze. Why was this? No matter how smart she was, she couldn't understand the reason behind this. She stared at Li Kuang with her grape-like eyes full of confusion. Li Kuang's eyes flashed with pain. After a moment he said, "Come here." Luo obeyed and went forward. He talked with Jiang Jiao and the others for a while. Shirtu and Hong Shan also woke up. Xiao Mai and Shirtu helped to repair the weapons. When they returned to the room and saw Hiyen, they asked, "Ehigo, aren't you going to find Lord Li today?" "I've already looked for him." Hiyen shrugged. Jiang Jiao thought for a moment. "Why don't we go with you to find Lord Li? Let's persuade him together?" Hiyen actually felt that Jiang Jiao's move wouldn't have much effect. Li Kuang's attitude was too firm. But since it had already come to this, he might as well give a Hail Mary a try. He got up and said, "Okay, we can try again." Back then, Lu Buwang took her as his disciple because he was annoyed to death by her. Li Kuang's patience was not as good as Lu Buwang's, so he might be able to do the same. However, the result of this was very likely that Li Kuang would draw his sword against her. Hiyen took the group to find Li Kuang again. On the way, they passed by Zhao Shiming's courtyard and saw Zhao Shiming's wife sitting at the door in a daze with her little grandson in her arms. Hiyen was stunned and went forward to ask, "Mrs. Zhao, did you see Miss Luo?" Before she left, she had clearly told Luo that she would ask Luo to find Mrs. Zhao. Why did it seem that Mrs. Zhao was alone now? Mrs. Zhao didn't seem to understand Hiyen's words. After a while she replied, "She was called away by the commander." Hiyen's heart skipped a beat. Without saying anything, he immediately ran to Li Kuang's courtyard. Behind him, Wang Ba and the others didn't understand. Wang Ba asked, Why is he so nervous? Does he have an affair with that woman? Hong Shan said. Don't talk nonsense. He just arrived in the Rundu not long ago. But he can still attract bees and butterflies, Wang Ba muttered. He Yin ran to Li Kuang's courtyard in one breath. Today, there were soldiers guarding in front of Li Kuang's house. She was shocked and was about to rush in when she was stopped by the soldiers at the door. What are you doing? The commander has ordered that no one is allowed to enter. Yin stared at his eyes. What is he doing inside? Her gaze was as cold as an ice knife. The soldiers were frightened by her. Before they could speak, Zhao Shiming also came over. Seeing this scene, he frowned and said, Why are you quarreling again? This is Xiaohe. Get out of the way. The two soldiers seemed to come back to their senses. They looked at He Yin again and said firmly, The commander has ordered that no one is allowed to enter. Muan Lang is the same. He Yin said, Get lost. She took the sword from one of the soldiers' waist. The two soldiers tried to stop her, but how could they stop her? He Yin slapped the two of them to the ground. Then, she kicked the door open and strode in. As soon as she entered, she was stunned. Other than Li Kuang, there were many deputies and soldiers in the room. There was also a group of women kneeling beside the chairs. These women were dressed neatly. Some of them had tear stains on their faces, while others looked calm. However, He Yin still remembered one or two of their faces. They were the Dawei prisoners she rescued from Yudo during the night of the sneak attack on the enemy camp. In the middle of the room, there was a woman lying on the ground. The woman's body was covered by a white cloth. She couldn't see who she was, but she was holding a small and exquisite flower garland in her hand. He Yan's eyes immediately turned red. Chapter 178. The room was silent for a moment, then Li Kuang's angry voice sounded. Who let you in? He Yan raised her head and glared at him, trying to suppress her trembling voice. You killed her. This is my family's business. What does it have to do with you? Li Kuang seemed to not want to see her. Get out. Some of the soldiers around couldn't bear to look at He Yin. Some avoided her gaze, and some bowed their heads in silence. No one said a word. Why should I get out? He Yin said coldly. Even if Luo is your family's business, these women were saved by me from Yudo. This shouldn't be your family's business, Lord Li. She suddenly raised her voice. Are you going to kill them all? When the women on the ground heard this, some of them started to sob quietly. Zhao Shiming, who rushed over after hearing the news, finally rushed in with Wang Ba and the others. When he saw the corpse in the room, he was shocked. Zhao Shiming asked with trembling hands. What's going on? What happened? Who is this person? He Yin took a step forward, and Li Kuang said angrily, Don't touch her. The next moment, the white cloth was removed. The girl on the ground was bleeding from her chest, and her clothes were dyed red. She was lying on the ground with a calm expression, like a beautiful flower. A few hours ago, she was still smiling and showing He Yin the garland she made, and telling others about her future. Now she didn't cry or smile, and was just a cold corpse. Iluo? Zhao Shiming was shocked. How can Iluo be here? Did Yudo sneak in? Lord Li? What's going on? If Yudo really sneaked in, how could Li Kuang be so calm, and the Rundu would be in chaos? But how could he explain the scene before him? Li Kuang stared at He Yin, but He Yin remained unmoved. He looked at him and said word by word. You'll have to ask the Lord Li about this. I think the Lord Li is trying to imitate Zhang Sun of the previous dynasty. As soon as he said this, Zhao Shiming gasped. Among Wang Ba and Shirtu's group, only Jiang Jiao had studied before. The others did not understand what He Yin meant. Only Jiang Jiao's expression changed slightly. In the previous dynasty, Zhang Sun guarded Suiyang City. When the city ran out of grain, he killed his concubines to feed the soldiers. What is the Lord Li doing? You want to be Dawei Zhang Sun, but there are other ways to make a living in Rundu. Why do you have to do this? What do you know? Li Kuang couldn't help but scold her. You're just a woman. If I can save the people of the city, I won't regret even if I die. She's just a woman. Dying for Rundu is not a pity at all. Ian looked at him. Li Kuang had fought the enemy side by side with her, and they had gone through life and death together. Although she and Li Kuang were not close friends, they could be considered old friends. Yan had never doubted Li Kuang's character. As a military leader, he was upright, brave, and loyal. However, in the eyes of the world, he was a hero. In his eyes, women were just like cats and dogs. They were animals. They were nothing more than sacrificial lambs. His favorite concubine could be killed in the blink of an eye for the sake of righteousness, and become food to fill his stomach. This was even more terrifying than swapping children for food. She had thought that this might happen, but that was the matter of the previous dynasty. Now it had not reached such a desperate situation. And Li Kuang was not Zhang Sun. Yan still had hope. She thought that perhaps she had thought too much of human nature. But nothing could stop it. Li Kuang still made the same choice. When he was reading the biography of Zhong Yi, in the Xianchangguan, Zhang Sun lost Suiyang. The enemy could not break the city, so they camped outside the city and waited for the soldiers and horses in the city to starve to death. There was no food in the city. Zhang Sun killed his beloved concubine, and forced the soldiers to eat her. Then someone killed the servants to make food for the army. The women in the city died, and the men took over. The number of people eaten was 20 to 30,000. None of the young people in the hall made a sound. The atmosphere was quiet. The teacher was still reading. Before the war, there were 40,000 people in Suiyang. When the city was broken, only 400 people survived. They were all young people in their teens, and they all came from rich and high-ranking officials. They had never heard of such a tragic thing. Cannibalism was already shocking enough. If a war was added, it would be even more shocking. The teacher asked, "Do you think what Zhang Sun did was right or wrong?" The young people spoke enthusiastically and each made their own statements. In the end, they still thought that Zhang Sun's actions at that time were understandable. The teacher said, "Killing people is against human nature." But it was not Zhang Sun's original intention. There is a saying, "The crime of Tsanghuang is light, but the merit of revival is heavy." The cannibalism is too small, but the merit of defending the city is too great. The young people nodded in agreement. They all thought that although it was tragic, it was precisely this incident that reflected Zhang Sun's loyalty. After all, the concubine was a family matter, but defending the city was a national matter. Zhang Sun was a loyal minister who sacrificed his concubine to defend the country. Ian did not think so at that time. She sat in the hall and did not speak. She also did not agree with the young people's opinions. She only frowned and looked solemn. The teacher saw that she did not agree and called her up with a smile. He asked, "He Rufei, do you have a different opinion?" At that time, she was still an idiot who was at the bottom of the exam in Xianchang Dojo. When her name was called, she felt a little uneasy. However, the anger in her heart could not be appeased. She finally gathered her courage and said, "Everyone says that Zhang Sun is a loyal minister and a righteous man. It is indeed true. But aren't those people who were eaten innocent? I can understand his choice, but if it were me, I would definitely not do that." "Oh, what do you think?" the teacher asked with a smile. "I will lead the remaining soldiers and fight to the death with the rebel army outside the city." The young girl stood in the hall. The sunlight shone through the window and fell on her face. Her delicate and slightly childish face was covered with a layer of determination. The person who holds the sword in his hand should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it is the enemy in front of him or the weak behind him. "I will never draw my sword against the weak." The hall was silent for a moment. Then, the laughter of the young people rang out. "Weak? What weak? He himself is a weak person. Also, brother, his swordsmanship is so bad. How can he hold a sword? I'm afraid you're not dreaming. What you said is so powerful. How is that possible? If such a bad knife and horse can be sent to defend the city, I think there is no need to defend the city." "Ha ha." Hien was surrounded by laughter and her face flushed red. She pursed her lips and thought, 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west, maybe one day, she would be a general galloping on the battlefield. At that time, she would definitely protect the people she wanted to protect. She would never let the unarmed common people become food for the army. If she wanted to do something, she would be the bravest general. The teacher calmed down the young people who were laughing at her. He looked at Hien with gratification in his eyes. "You can think from the perspective of the common people. It shows that you have a heart of compassion for the weak. This is very good. Yan sighed in her heart. It was not that she had a heart of compassion for the weak. It was because the young people who were laughing in the hall were all men. Naturally, they thought of her as Zhang Sun. And she was a woman. Naturally, she stood in the position of beloved concubine. From the standpoint of Zhang Sun, this action was very righteous. From the standpoint of beloved concubine, this was just an undeserved disaster. The joys and sorrows of people in the world could not be interconnected at all times. It was nothing more than a choice made based on one's position. Just like this moment. Yan said. You are a loyal subject. What crime have you committed? You don't need to say so much to me, Li Kuang said coldly. Iluo is my concubine. She is my person. How I deal with my people is my business. As for these women, ask them if they were willing. I did not force them. Yan looked at the women sitting on the floor. One of the women's eyes were red. She kowtowed to Yan and said softly, Thank you, Darren, for planning for us. It's just that we have already been defiled by the Yudo. Our bodies are no longer clean. Since we cannot go home, we also do not have the face to live in this world. Now that we can use our bodies to fight for a chance to live for the Rundu, it is our good fortune. Perhaps this merit can help us wash away the mud on our bodies and accumulate good fortune in the future. What merit? Before she could say anything, Yan interrupted her. Wang Ba and the others looked at Yan in surprise. All along, Yan's temperament was very gentle. Even when Wang Ba provoked her in the past, she did not say a single word of profanity. Now that she was cursing, it was obvious that she was very angry. What do you mean by our bodies are no longer clean? What do you mean by no face to live in this world? Yan said angrily. Is this your fault? She looked at Li Kuang and the soldiers in the room with their heads bowed. Is this their fault? If you think that this is doing merit, then you are gravely mistaken. Lord Li. She turned to look at Li Kuang. You are the city's chief soldier. Let me tell you, these women were captured by the Yudo because the Yudo are cruel, and because you are not capable. What wrong did they do? I have never seen an injured person in the wrong, and the person who harmed them is relieved. You are doing exactly what the Yudo want. In their eyes, the people of Dawei are all fools. They only care about doing evil, so naturally, there will be innocent people to bear the blame for them. How can there be such a ridiculous thing in this world? If being touched by the Yudo means that they are not clean, then from the moment they stepped into Dawei's land, there is no need to fight against them. Dawei's land is also not clean. Just give it to them. What's the point of fighting? You. Be careful with your words. Li Kuang suppressed his anger. I won't. Yan stared at him. There seemed to be a ball of fire in her eyes that wanted to burn everything around her. You are a man. You are their general. You pointed your knife at your women and your people. What is this? If you follow me today to kill a few Yudo and eat Yudo's meat and drink their blood, I will respect you as men. But there is no such thing in this world. Men can't win a battle, so they ask innocent and weak women to sacrifice themselves. This is called cowardice. I said before they are willing. Are they really willing? Yan's gaze was sharp. Okay, let me ask you. She looked at the women. Why do you think you can't live? Is it because of what others say? If others say something, you will refute them. If you are not good with words, you will use your fists. Is this your fault? If they still use this to humiliate you, then they are the most despicable and shameless people. There is no need to show them any mercy. I saved your lives. If you give them up so easily, where do you put me? Her expression was frightening. The women did not dare to speak. After a while, one of the young women burst into tears. She sobbed. I don't want to die. I'm scared. Li Kuang's face was ashen. If you don't want to die, I am here. No one can force you to die. How dare you say this? Li Kuang said. This is not the Liangzhou guard. Yan's expression calmed. She stepped forward and shielded the women behind her. Lord Li, Iluo is your concubine. She has been with you for many years. She is not an item that can be casually given away. She is yours, but before that she is a person. Today you cannot touch these women. If you want to, He Yan slowly pulled out the long sword she had taken from the soldiers at the door. You have to go through my sword first. You think I don't dare? Li Kuang was furious. He pulled out the long sword at his waist. When the surrounding soldiers saw this, they all pulled out their swords and pointed them at He Yan. The room was filled with a tense atmosphere. Zhao Shiming said anxiously, "What's wrong with you? Why are our own people fighting with our own people? Our top priority is to defeat those Yudo." "Lordly, I think Xiao Hedarin is right. You can't eat people. If you do this, the people outside will follow suit. What will happen to Runda City then? Even if we manage to defend the city, do you want the people of the world to point at our backs and curse us?" He also had his own selfish motives. Yi Luo was Li Kuang's most beloved concubine. Zhao Shiming had to admit that Yi Luo was beautiful and intelligent. She was very lovable. If it was him, he definitely wouldn't be able to do it. However, Li Kuang could kill her without any hesitation. These martial artists, sigh. In the end, as officials, wouldn't they all have to set an example? At his age, he hadn't even killed a chicken in his life. If he had to send his family to their deaths, Zhao Shiming would rather die himself. Thus he immediately stood on He Yan's side. Li Kuang didn't care about Zhao Shiming. He didn't care about a county magistrate who didn't even know how to wield a sword. What made him angry was He Yan. No one would have thought that He Yan would barge in so rashly and criticize him without any explanation. Yi Luo had been with him for many years. Didn't his heart ache? Didn't he hesitate when he killed her? However, the battle had already reached this point. If the Rundu couldn't be defended, everyone would die. Killing Yi Luo in front of these deputy generals also made them understand their determination to defend the Rundu. Among these deputy generals, they had met Yi Luo many times. They couldn't bear to see a living girl killed in front of them. There were also people who pleaded for Yi Luo. However, Li Kuang thought that he would do what Zhang Xin did in the past. It didn't matter even if he had to bear the curse of the world. His merits and demerits would be judged by future generations. However, this Muanlang He Yan barged in and stood in front of him to protect those women. His gaze was so bright that it made him feel ashamed. He suddenly thought of He Rufei. General Fei Hong, who was still a deputy general, would try his best to save the women who were captured by the enemy in every battle. In fact, when these women returned home, what awaited them was not good. However, He Rufei would always patiently comfort them and encourage them. Li Kuang had never seen a man who was so considerate. However, he thought that General Fei Hong was the only one in the world who was so naive. However, another one appeared in front of him today. Li Kuang's expression was cold. "Muanlang, are you going to fight with me?" "I'm sorry, but I can't let them die here." A woman on the side cried and looked at He Yan. "Sir, don't waste your energy on us. If our lives can be exchanged for the safety of the Rundu, we are willing." "The safety of the Rundu cannot be exchanged for by you," He Yan said coldly. "Sacrificing women for safety is no different from begging for mercy from the enemy. Lordly, this is not the previous dynasty and you are not Zhang Sun." Li Kuang was almost angry. He knew that every word of the young man in front of him was correct, but he had no other choice. "You want to fight with me?" he said coldly. "What the hell is this?" Wang Ba spat on the ground. "You think it's reasonable to kill a woman? We bandits don't kill women, the elderly, or children. As the saying goes, even bandits have morals. You soldiers who live off the imperial grain are worse than animals. Don't waste time. We the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th of the Liang province guards accept your challenge." He spoke as if he was fighting in a martial arts arena. Li Kuang was so angry that his expression became even uglier. At this time, another person walked in. It was Chu Zhao. He looked at Li Kuang and bowed. Then he smiled and said, "Lordly, this is not appropriate. His Majesty has always promoted benevolent governance. If word of cannibalism reaches His Majesty's ears, I'm afraid His Majesty will not be happy." He was going to stand on He Yan's side. Chu Zhao represented Prime Minister Su. One was a Liang province guard, and the other was Prime Minister Su. The pressure was unimaginable. Li Kuang was angry and annoyed. Who was this He Yan? Why were they following him like this? However, the soldiers around him were all looking at him. He gritted his teeth and said, "You are not my opponent." He Yan smiled and held his sword horizontally in front of him. "Lordly, why don't you try?" The tip of the sword was cold and the air was cold. The gunpowder in the room was about to explode. At this time, a soldier's voice suddenly came from outside. "Sir, sir." Li Kuang was filled with anger. He couldn't go up or down. Hearing this, he said angrily, "What are you shouting for?" In the next moment, the door to the room was opened again. Someone walked in with a calm voice. "Lordly, before you teach the Liang province guards a lesson, you should ask me first." This voice. Yan was startled. He quickly turned his head. He saw a young man dressed in dark clothes with narrow sleeves and dark armor walk forward and stand in front of him. They hadn't seen each other for a month, but the last time they met felt like 10,000 years. His appearance was handsome, and his figure was like a spring willow. His expression was as cold as ever. Military Governor Xiao. Li Kuang couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He didn't expect to see Xiao Ju, the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, here. Xiao Ju didn't look at He Yan or Li Kuang. His gaze swept past the crying women. He said calmly, "The person holding the sword should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it is pointed at the enemy in front of him or the weak behind him. You shouldn't point your sword at the weak." He Yan suddenly looked up. Chapter 179. His eyes were cold and his voice was calm, but in that instant, He Yan was brought back to that afternoon in the Xianchang dojo. His voice overlapped with the young boy's voice, making it impossible to tell who it was. From outside came a soldier's shout. He was excited and joyful. "Sir! Lord! Reinforcements are here! Reinforcements are here!" "Reinforcements?" He Yan looked at Xiao Ju's back. "He brought the Nanfu army? How is this possible?" Just as he heard this, Li Kuang pushed aside the people in front of him and rushed out of the room. He Yan looked at Xiao Ju and also rushed out. Outside the city, there were shouts of killing. He Yan climbed up the city tower and looked down with Li Kuang. On the plains, Yudo and Dewey's troops were fighting. The word Yan was written on the war flag. There was a young man sitting on the horse in the lead. His hair was tied up high, and he had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. He wore silver armor and held a halberd in his hand. He looked particularly high-spirited as he led his men to fight. "Yanhe." He Yan smiled. Li Kuang, who had rushed over, saw this scene and was also excited. He immediately ordered the troops in the city, "Follow me out to fight Yudo." Li Kuang did not expect the reinforcements to arrive, and neither did Hyatt. The day before they decided to attack the city, they were caught off guard by the troops brought by Lieutenant General Yan He. Li Kuang led the Runda troops to join the battle, and the Utho troops were forced to retreat. Their leader, Hyatt, abandoned his troops and fled. The rest of the Utho soldiers were scattered like scattered sand. A portion of them were captured by Li Kuang, while the rest retreated south of Rundu with Hyatt. "Don't chase a cornered enemy." Yan He stopped Li Kuang from chasing after them. He wiped off the Wutong blood on his armor and casually tossed his handkerchief to a servant beside him. He mocked, "With just these few Wutong soldiers, you don't even dare to come out of the city? Too cowardly." These words were not pleasant to hear, and it was said by a kid who was much younger than him. Li Kuang was not angry. If Yan He had not brought reinforcements, the Yudo would not have retreated so quickly. He was truly grateful to Yan He. This was out of his expectations. Who knew that General Fei Hong, who had been waiting bitterly, did not come, but Lieutenant General Gui De came. "I thank Generals Yan on behalf of the people of the city. The Rundu will never forget your help." However, he hesitated. Why did Generals Yan come to the Rundu? He had never written a letter to Yan He. Yan He snorted and laughed. He carried the Fengtian halberd on his back and walked forward casually. "Let's talk inside." The soldiers cleaned up the battlefield outside until late at night. Everyone clapped their hands in celebration of this great victory. Not only that, Yan He had not only brought reinforcements, he had also brought food. The soldiers set up a large pot in the city and used the food they brought to cook porridge. The people of the Rundu who were still alive carried bowls of porridge with gratitude. The fragrance of the rice floated in the air of the Runda city and did not dissipate for a long time. Inside the house, Zhao Shiming was rubbing his hands nervously as he looked at the two people sitting on the table. One was the Right Army Commander Xiao Huijin, the other was Guide Lieutenant General Yan He. He was just a county magistrate of the Rundu. How could he meet such important people in his life? He could be considered lucky. However, one of them was cold, while the other was arrogant. Both of them did not seem easy to get close to. Zhao Shiming did not know what to say other than thanking them repeatedly for saving the people of the Rundu. At this moment, Zhao Shiming sighed in his heart. If only Ilua was still here. It would be much better to interact with a smart beauty than these old men. In the past, Ilua would always be the one to smooth things over. Li Kuang probably thought of this as well. His expression was a little stiff. Yan He, the lieutenant general of Guida, was only in his early 20s. He was very young, and could be considered handsome. However, his gaze always carried a hint of provocation. His chin was also slightly raised, as though he did not like to place people in his eyes. His hair was tied up very high, and his ponytail fell behind his head, showing the arrogance of a young man. In comparison, the Right Army Commander Xiao Ju, who was sitting beside him, was as calm as autumn water. After taking off his armor, he looked more like a noble young master sitting in a winery in the capital. He was not as arrogant as Yan He, but his calm and indifferent expression was also emitting an aura that kept people 1,000 miles away. Zhao Shiming wiped his sweat. What should he say? He couldn't afford to offend these two great gods. Before he could think of what to say, Li Kuang spoke first. Li Kuang hesitated for a moment and asked Yan He, "Generals Yan, why did you suddenly come to help the Rundu?" Yan He laughed softly and sat up straight. He said, "I haven't asked you yet. Is there a person called He Yen in the Rundu?" When he said this, everyone in the room had different expressions. Xiao Ju's gaze moved slightly, but he did not say anything. "Seems like there is," Yan He said. "Lord Li, call that person over. I want to meet him." He Yen was waiting outside the room. Sure enough, not long after, someone came out and said, "Lord Xiaohe, Generals Yen invites you in." Wang Ba was stunned. "What's going on? He's asking you to go in alone. Is he going to punish me later? Why don't we go with you?" Jiang Jiao was also slightly hesitant. "You left the Liangzhou guards this time. If Military Governor Xiao issues a military order to punish you, it's not because of that." He Yen looked at the door and shook his head. "Don't worry, nothing will happen." She patted Jiang Jiao's shoulder and turned around to walk into Li Kuang's room alone. Everyone in the room followed He Yen in, and their gazes landed on her. The young man in silver armor looked at He Yen and sized up He Yen. He said, "You are He Yen?" "Yes." He Yen stood up from his chair and looked down at He Yen. He was a head taller than He Yen. He used his hand to measure the height of He Yan's head. He clicked his tongue and asked Xiao Ju seriously, "There are still people this short in the military camp?" He Yen was speechless. He retracted his hand and rubbed his chin as he sized up He Yen. "You're not tall, but you're quite brave. You're the one who wrote the letter asking for help and asked me to come to the Rundu?" As soon as he said this, Li Kuang looked at He Yen. Xiao Ju's gaze also landed on He Yen. He Yen calmly accepted everyone's different expressions. "Yes. Then you have good taste," Yan He said disapprovingly. "You didn't ask He Rufei, that useless person in front of you. Instead, you asked me to come and help the Rundu. It seems like you know very well that I am more reliable than He Rufei." He Yen didn't say anything. How could he say anything? If he followed his words, he would also step on himself and deny what he said. He Yen was actually quite happy to hear people scold He Rufei like this. That day, she and Li Kuang parted on bad terms. After she noticed that the Runda's situation was not good, she borrowed a few people from Zhao Shiming and went to ask for help from Yan He in Ling County. She still remembered that Yan He led the troops to guard Ling County. It was not as close as Hua Yuan. In fact, Yan He's reputation was not as good as He Rufei's. If a normal person asked for help, the first person they would think of would be He Rufei and not Yan He. However, He Yen knew that He Rufei would not come at all. That was why she took a step back and asked for the next best thing. It was not easy to mobilize the troops in Jinling. In comparison, Yan He had a lot more freedom. However, Yan He might not come at all. Therefore, in the letter, Other than writing about the critical situation in the Rundu, she also wrote about He Rufei's despicable actions of not helping when he saw someone in need. The words you scolded He Rufei in the letter made me feel very comfortable. Hien looked at Hien. You really know how I feel. Hien thought, how could she not know? As her classmate, this person in front of her bullied her a lot during those years in the Xianchang dojo. It was Yan He and a few other youths who would cause trouble for her every now and then. They would either tease her or bully her. Seeing this person, she could almost see the dark days in the Xianchang dojo. Yan He hated her. He started to hate her when they were classmates in the Xianchang dojo. After so many years, he still stubbornly hated her. In order to please him, Hien wrote a lot of bad things about He Rufei in the letter. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Looking at it now, it was true. Because Hien insulted He Rufei, Yan He naturally turned Hien into his own camp. Even though you are short and thin, I think you are very smart. In the next moment, Yan He placed his hand on his shoulder. How about you follow me in the future? Yan Nangguang. Xiao Ju's gaze landed on his hand and reminded. She is a member of the Liang Province Guards. Liang Province Guards? Hien retracted his hand and looked at Hien. He asked in confusion. Aren't you from the Rundu? General Xian, Hien said. I was in the Liang Province Guards recruit camp before. Later, Her Majesty personally conferred the title of Muan Lang. I heard that the Rundu was in trouble and specially came to help the city. She emphasized the words Muan Lang. Even though Xiao Ju classified her as a member of the Liang Province Guards, if she didn't want to implicate him, it was best to draw a clear line. You are a member of the Liang Province Guards and came to the Rundu yourself? Yan He glanced at Xiao Ju and then looked at Hien. The relationship between them was too complicated, and he couldn't understand it. He simply returned to his seat and leaned against the chair. He snorted and said, Forget it, I don't want to know about your complicated internal affairs. However, what is it again? Hien was already used to this fellow's arrogance and reminded him. Hien, I didn't come because of your letter asking for help. Even if I came, it wouldn't be so fast. Zhao Shiming asked cautiously. Then may I ask why General Xian? Yan He laughed and looked at Xiao Ju provocatively. The Commander-in-Chief of the Right Army personally asked me for help. This is the first time in his life that he has asked me for help. I am so generous, so of course, I have to come and help. Isn't that right, Military Governor Xiao? Xiao Ju's expression was indifferent, and she didn't pay attention to his words. Hien was astonished. Yan He meant. Xiao Ju also asked Yan He for help? That's right, he didn't bring the southern prefecture soldiers here. After all, Liang Province wasn't as close as Ling County. She actually thought of the same thing as Xiao Ju. In that case, even if she didn't write the letter asking for help, Yan He would still come. Runda City shouldn't be destroyed. Lordly County Magistrate Zhao. Yan He played with his hair. Although this time it was Hien and Military Governor Xiao who asked me for help, the one who led the troops here was me, Yan He. You know very well where the credit goes this time. The victory of the Runda City this time was all thanks to General Xian. Zhao Shiming quickly said. As soon as he spoke, he realized that there was another person in the room. He immediately looked at Xiao Ju. Seeing that the young man's expression was calm, and there wasn't a trace of displeasure, he was relieved. Fortunately, this one person didn't care about the credit. If both of them came to snatch the credit, his small temple in Runda City wouldn't be able to accommodate two big Buddhas fighting. Hien had long heard about Yan He's love for credit. However, this time the Runda City was defended because of Yan He's help. It was understandable that he wanted the credit. Yan He stretched lazily and yawned. I've been rushing for days and I've been playing Yudo the moment I arrived. I haven't had a chance to rest properly. I need to rest. I'll have to trouble everyone to prepare hot water for me. There's no need for food. I heard that the people here are so hungry that they're about to eat people. I don't have the hobby of eating people. Zhao Shiming repeatedly said yes and quickly ordered the servants to prepare the food for Yan He. Yan He stood up and was about to walk out. When he passed by Xiao Ju, he stopped and looked at Xiao Ju. He said in a conceited tone, Whether you admit it or not, Xiao Huijin, this time I've won against you. After saying this, he seemed to be in a good mood. He placed his hands behind his head and swaggered out. Yin stared at his back. He was puzzled. To be honest, he didn't like Xiao Ju back then, and always went against Xiao Ju. It was all because Xiao Ju was better than him in both civil and military matters. After being in second place for a long time, he wanted to have a taste of being in first place. However, that first place just wouldn't drop no matter what. It was indeed annoying. However, even she, who was in last place, would always find fault with him. Yin didn't understand. How did she get in his way? The person who was fighting with her for last place was Lin Shuanghe, not Yin He. Why was Yin He so resentful towards her? This resentment had persisted for so many years. However, Yin He's temperament was exactly the same as back then. He was competitive, obstinate, and self-opinionated. All his emotions were written on his face. As she was thinking about this, Xiao Ju stood up and walked out. When she passed by her, she said coldly, "Come here." "Yin," she sighed in her heart. She knew that this day would come sooner or later, but she didn't expect it to come so early. After all, who would have thought that Xiao Ju would follow Yin He to the rendu? Jiang Jiao and the others waited patiently outside until Yin came out. When they saw her walking out with Xiao Ju, they all looked serious. From the looks of it, they were going to settle scores in private. Hong Shan gestured to her to ask if they needed to go and plead for leniency. Yin shook her head slightly. This wasn't something that could be brushed off with one or two pleas. The room darkened. Only the light from the oil lamp on the table shone on the wall, casting shadows on the walls. The room that Zhao Shiming arranged for Xiao Ju could be considered luxurious. Yin followed him in, and buried her head. She was thinking about how to smooth things over when the person in front of her suddenly stopped and turned around. She bumped into Xiao Ju's chest. Yin took 2 steps back and stood still. She raised her head and saw the person in front of her looking down at her. Although he didn't say anything, it was a little scary. The air was so quiet that it felt cold even in the summer. Yin paused and coughed softly. "Commander-in-Chief." He looked at the sword in Yan's hand. It was the sword that she snatched from Li Kuang's guards when she was trying to save the women who were captured. She forgot to return it to Li Kuang. Yan's heart tightened. She put the sword on the table and explained, "This is someone else's sword." Xiao Ju took a step forward. Yin held his breath. He thought that she was going to denounce him. The next moment, his arm was grabbed and turned over. There was a knife wound on his palm. It wasn't deep. He had been holding it. The bleeding had stopped, but it looked a little scary. Yin probably hurt his hand when he was fighting with Li Kuang's guards. The situation was critical, and he didn't pay attention to it. If it wasn't for Xiao Ju's actions, he wouldn't have noticed it. He didn't say anything. He turned and walked to the side. Yin didn't know what to do. He heard him say, "Come here." The handkerchief was soaked in hot water. When it covered his palm, it stung a little. It was more of an itch. It was as if a colorful butterfly had landed on his palm and slowly crawled over it, leaving behind a numbing shadow. He lowered his head and sprinkled the powder on Yan's wound. His expression was focused and quiet. Yin stared at him. The young man's eyelashes were thick and long. Under the light, his side profile was as handsome as a painting. He was silent, gentle, and calm. There was no condemnation or sarcasm as expected. Yin inexplicably felt a sense of guilt. It was as if he had done something unforgivable and had wronged Xiao Ju. She mumbled, "Commander-in-Chief, actually I didn't follow 4th young Master Chu to the rendu. It was a coincidence that Chu Zhao was here." However, in Xiao Ju's eyes, she might have misunderstood. Although she was determined to stay away from Xiao Ju to avoid bringing trouble to him, she didn't want him to misunderstand and think that she was on Chu Zhao's side. "I know." His voice was cold and emotionless. Yin didn't know what to say for a moment. Yan's movements were very gentle, even gentler than when he was applying the medicine on himself. Because he was very tall, he had to bend over slightly when applying the medicine. Yin originally followed his gaze and looked at Xiao Ju's palm. As she looked, her gaze fell on Xiao Ju's face. No matter how many good words were used to describe him, she felt that something was missing. Just as she was lost in thought, Xiao Ju suddenly raised his head and met her gaze without warning. His dark eyes were glittering and clear as autumn water. She was caught red-handed and her ears turned red. However, she still had to maintain a calm expression. She pointed at her palm and said, "It's done." The wound didn't look as scary as before after the powder was sprinkled on it. Yen retracted his hand and felt a little uneasy. This didn't seem to be Xiaoju's style. If Xiaoju was a normal person, she would have come over and asked him questions. However, she was so quiet today that Yen didn't know where to start. Why did she change her personality? Yen didn't understand. However, if Xiaoju didn't ask, she didn't know what to say either. After he finished applying the medicine for Yen, he sat down on a chair in the room. He didn't let Yen leave, nor did he have any intention of asking her questions. After a while, Yen couldn't help but ask, "Commander-in-Chief, why didn't you ask me why I left the Liangzhou guards and came to the Rundu without permission? You are the Muan Lang personally appointed by Her Majesty. You have the official seal and the official uniform. You can decide whether you want to stay or leave. You don't have to discuss it with me," Xiaoju said calmly. "It's up to you whether you want to stay or leave." This was originally an excuse that Yen had prepared for herself. She didn't expect that Xiaoju would be one step ahead of her. This made Yen unable to continue her words. "I forced Wang Ba and the others to come here. Please don't punish them. I will take responsibility for this matter. I don't have any bad intentions. I was just worried that the Rundu would fall, so I overestimated myself and came to help." Forget it. Since Xiaoju didn't want to speak, she would take responsibility for herself first. Her attitude was better when she admitted her mistake. "Why do you think," Xiaoju said, "Hirufei won't help the Rundu?" In the end he would still ask this question. Yen sighed in his heart and looked at him. "If I say that Hirufei is not a good person, will you believe me?" Xiaoju looked at her indifferently and raised the corner of her mouth. "Evidence? I can't produce any evidence, and I can't convince you. However, in my opinion, Hirufei isn't the hero that people say he is." She said Hirufei instead of General Fei Hong. "Commander-in-Chief." Yen looked at him and slowly said, "If one day Hirufei and I have different standpoints and draw our swords against each other, which side will you stand on?" She had wanted to ask this question for a long time. Hirufei and she would eventually have such a day. The Hirufei that Xiaoju knew was the Hirufei of the Xianchang Gymnasium, and the Yen that Xiaoju knew was the current Yen. Both of them were actually her, but how would Xiaoju choose? Yen wasn't very sure. It seemed that every one of her had a good relationship with Xiaoju, but they weren't close friends. Yen didn't know what she was like in Xiaoju's heart, and what she meant to him, whether it was in the past or now. Xiaoju looked at her quietly. After a while he said, "It's very late today. You should go out." He didn't answer Yen. Yen didn't know if she was disappointed or glad. She was disappointed that Xiaoju didn't answer her directly, but she was glad that Xiaoju didn't deny her. She nodded. "Yes." Yen retreated, and the room once again quieted down. The young man's gaze fell on the wound medicine on the table. He lowered his beautiful eyes and no one knew what he was thinking. After a while someone walked in. It was Fei Nu. He walked to Xiaoju and whispered, "Young master, Luan Ying's news came back. Sui's problem hasn't been found yet." "She's fine." Xiaoju interrupted him. Fei Nu was stunned. Yen had many suspicious points. From the beginning until now, she didn't tell anyone. She brought a few new Liangzhou guards to the Rundu. No matter what, no one could give a reasonable explanation. She left with Chu Zhao one after the other. Now she saw Chu Zhao again in the Rundu. Qi Wu and Fei Nu couldn't help but suspect that Yen might be Chu Zhao's man. But they also felt that if she was Chu Zhao's man, her behavior was too arrogant and undisguised. The young man stood up. His shadow was long under the light. He looked at the light at the corner of the table thoughtfully. After a while he said, "Tell Wanning that she doesn't need to investigate Yen. Investigate Hirufei." Chapter 180. The Rundu city gradually regained its vitality. Yanhe's troops not only chased away the Yudo, but they also brought back food. The food sent from Huayuan solved the Rundu's urgent needs. "General Fei Hong is not in Huayuan?" Li Kuang looked at Yanhe in confusion. "He already returned to Shuajing? How is that possible?" Are you suspecting that I'm lying? Yan He frowned. No, Li Kuang said. It's just that when the Rundu was surrounded by the Yudo, I immediately asked for General He's help. There were 3 groups of people, so it's impossible for there to be no news at all. I originally thought that he didn't come because the situation in Huayuan wasn't good, but why did he return to Shuajing? You'll have to ask him. Yan He put his hands behind his head and leaned back in his chair. I'm not familiar with Hirufei. Li Kuang didn't say anything. While the two were silent, someone came in. It was Zhao Shiming. Zhao Shiming first looked at Yan He, then carefully said to Li Kuang, Commander, that Iluo is being buried today. When Li Kuang heard this, his expression became ugly. After a while he stood up and said, Let's go. Iluo wasn't actually from the Rundu, but her parents passed away early, so she didn't have any other relatives. It was summer, so they couldn't bring Iluo's body back to Shuajing, so they could only bury her here. She was buried in a deep forest in the Runda city. The scenery was beautiful, and there was a large grape forest not far away. Iluo loved to eat grapes when she was alive, so she would probably be happy to be buried here. When they arrived, they didn't expect that Xiaoju and Hiyan would also be there. Beside the two of them, there was a young man in white holding a folding fan. Xiaoju didn't mind, but when Li Kuang saw Hiyan, he felt uncomfortable. That day, he and Hiyan had almost drawn their swords in the hall. In the end, it was true that everything came to an abrupt end because of Xiaoju's appearance. However, after the dust had settled in the dead of the night, Hiyan's words always lingered in his ears, smashing him until he couldn't sleep at night. On the bed next to him, when he turned his head, he could see Iluo's smiling face. However, when he opened his eyes, he couldn't grasp anything. He had not been able to become Zhang Sun, but he had also lost beautiful silk forever. This Yan Hiyan Hiyan Yan Yan Hiyan, Yan Hiyan Hiyan Yan, Yan Hiyan Hiyan, Yan Hiyan Yan Yan, Yan Hiyan, Yan Yan Hiyan Yan Yan, Yan Yan Hiyan. Hiyan didn't look at Li Kuang. In fact, Shi Yanyan didn't want to look at Li Kuang. She and Li Kuang had fought side by side. She knew that Li Kuang was loyal and righteous. However, because she was a woman, she always stood on Iluo's side. Therefore, she felt that the woman was innocent. The coffin was placed in the ground. Everything was settled. Ian looked at the small stone tablet. What was ridiculous was that Iluo died at the hands of Li Kuang. However, the name on the tablet was that she was Li Kuang's wife. Hiyan lowered her eyes and walked forward. She placed the small garland with purple flowers in her hand in front of the stone tablet. This girl once said to her that she hoped that she would still be Li Kuang's favorite concubine 10 years later. Life was unpredictable. Before 10 years had passed, she would no longer exist in this world. In a way, her wish seemed to have come true. Not only 10 years, Li Kuang wouldn't be able to forget Iluo for the rest of his life. Shi Yanyan didn't know if she was sad or sarcastic. However, she was already buried. It was useless to say anything. The crowd gradually dispersed. Perhaps Li Kuang couldn't face Hiyan's gaze. He didn't even say goodbye to Hiyan and left in a hurry. Hiyan and the other two walked behind him. Lin Shuanghe stole a glance at Hiyan and whispered, Sister He, don't be sad. Hiyan was a woman. Women were soft-hearted. Lin Shuanghe also knew that Hiyan couldn't bear to see the world treat women unfairly. Li Kuang wanted to protect the city. However, this heavy burden was shouldered by his concubine alone. She even paid the price with her life. In his opinion, it was too heartless. These days, he was busy treating the wounded soldiers with the Runda's medical officer. He didn't have time to catch up with Hiyan. Today was the first time he saw Hiyan since he came to the Rundu. At first glance, he felt that Hiyan had lost a lot of weight. She was originally thin and weak. Now, she looked so weak that she could be blown away by the wind. It seemed that there was no food in the city. She was starving to this extent. Hiyan shook her head. I just feel a little helpless. After all, in the world, there were many people who thought like Li Kuang. There were only a few people who thought like her. Let alone the injustice of the world. She couldn't even save a single Iluo. Her personal ability was really insignificant. It was harder than ascending to heaven to change the world's opinion. However, Hiyan smiled. I didn't expect that when the commander-in-chief came in that day, he would stand on my side. She looked at Xiaoju. I still remember what the commander-in-chief said. Xiao Ju said. I didn't say it. He Yan was stunned. Of course, she knew that it wasn't Xiao Ju who said that. That was what she answered her teacher when she was in the Xianchang Hall. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to still remember it. She also didn't expect that Xiao Ju would say it under the circumstances at that time. Then who said it? She asked tentatively. Xiao Ju looked ahead and didn't say anything. What appeared in her mind was a spring afternoon in the Xianchang Hall of Shuo many years ago. At that time, he was still young. He followed his classmates to study in the school. The spring sun was very warm. It was so hot that it made people have beautiful dreams. He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He casually listened to his teacher's lecture. The hero of the previous dynasty killed his concubine to reward the 3 armies, and won a good reputation for righteousness. The youth scrambled to speak. Everyone felt that they were the hero. He didn't participate. The world was like a game of chess. People were like ants. At that time, whether it was the hero or the beloved concubine, they were just insignificant drops of water in the torrent of history. Whether they could cause a splash or not, it wasn't important. In the end, it would all pass. He was halfway through his beautiful dream when he heard his teacher say, "He Rufei, do you have a different opinion?" He Rufei? Xiao Ju remembered that young master He. Among the many talents in the Xianchang Hall, he was particularly clumsy and conspicuous. However, he was also extremely hardworking. If he was like Lin Shuanghe, it would have been good. However, he had the lofty ambition of defying the heavens and changing his fate, written all over his body. This kind of person in the secular world would be considered laughable. However, this kind of youth's pure enthusiasm wasn't annoying. Since he was called out by his teacher, he probably had to give a vague answer. Xiao Ju didn't open his eyes. He calmly listened. Everyone says that Zhang Sun is a loyal and righteous person. That's not false. However, aren't those people who were eaten innocent? I can understand his choice. However, if it were me, I definitely wouldn't do that. The youth who had closed his eyes and pretended to sleep slightly trembled. His long eyelashes were like the wings of a butterfly resting on a flower, startled by the occasional breeze. Oh, what are you going to do? I'm going to take the remaining soldiers and fight to the death with the rebel army outside the city. The person holding the sword should know where the tip of the sword is pointed, whether it's at the enemy in front of me or the weak behind me. Such childish, naive, and righteous words. A trace of ridicule appeared at the corner of the youth's mouth. He slowly opened his eyes. In an instant, sunlight broke through the window and woke him up from his beautiful dream. The golden light shone on the thin and weak figure in front of him. The originally unremarkable person, at some point, became as dazzling as a rainbow in a mountain stream. I will never draw my sword against the weak. It seemed like this was the first time he seriously looked at He Rufei's appearance. The mask covered his face. No matter when, no matter how stupid this person was, his posture was always upright and straight. The ridicule on the youth's lips dissipated. Gradually, the corners of his mouth curled up. He looked out the window and felt that the spring sun was brilliant and beautiful. Even the idiot who was usually ridiculed by others seemed respectable. Perhaps, he wasn't an idiot after all. When they reached the end of the deep forest, Xiao Ju didn't reply to He Yan's question. He stopped here and said, I have something to discuss with Li Kuang. You don't have to follow me. He Yan nodded and watched Xiao Ju leave first. Her current relationship with Xiao Ju was a little strange. She couldn't be considered a subordinate. In terms of the title bestowed by His Majesty, her official position naturally couldn't be compared to Xiao Ju's, but she couldn't be considered Xiao Ju's soldier. But if she wasn't considered a subordinate, Muan Lang didn't have any real power. If she didn't follow Xiao Ju, she wouldn't even be able to do anything. Lin Shuanghe waved his hand in front of her. Sister He? He Yan came back to his senses. Brother Lin. I was too busy a few days ago. There weren't enough doctors in the Rundu, so I could only bite the bullet and do it. Speaking up to this point, he complained, my title of white-robed divine doctor is too cheap. I don't take a single cent. Those who don't know would think that I'm a person who likes to do good deeds. Sister, when we return to the capital, you can't tell anyone that I've treated women outside of the capital. The rules can't be broken. If others find out, everyone will come to me for treatment. Our Lin family's doorstep will be trampled to pieces. Lin Shuanghe was a person who could always worry about things that he shouldn't worry about. He Yan was speechless for a moment, then said, "I'll remember." Lin Shuanghe finally relaxed, then said, "I haven't asked you yet. How are you doing here? You're really amazing. You came to the Rundu on your own without even saying anything. The Liangzhou guards almost caused a huge mess. What were you thinking? Even if you want to make a name for yourself, you should take it easy. Why did you come to such a dangerous place? Even if riches and honor are found in danger, we should first protect our lives and then plan for the future." He Yan knew that he was teasing him, so he only smiled. "Sister," Lin Shuanghe looked at her and stopped waving his fan. He thought for a moment. "Why do I feel that you've changed a lot after not seeing you for so long?" "Have I?" "Yes," Lin Shuanghe replied with certainty. From the first time he saw He Yan in the Liangzhou guards, even when she was heavily injured by Ride-Amusi, this girl was still alive and kicking, constantly radiating warmth like the sun. Her eyes were always bright and full of life. It had only been a little over a month now. When he saw He Yan again, this girl seemed to have many things on her mind. She seemed to have become strangely silent. It was as if something had shaved away all her happiness in one night, giving birth to another version of herself. It was a bit unfamiliar, gloomy, as if she used something to separate herself from others, making it impossible to approach. "Did something happen?" he asked. He Yan shook her head, saying with a smile, "It's nothing." However, she suddenly thought of another matter and asked Lin Shuanghe, "Brother Lin, in the days I left the Liangzhou guards, did something happen in the Liangzhou guards?" "Why do you say that?" Lin Shuanghe rubbed his chin. "Do you think something's wrong?" He Yan hesitated for a moment but still said, "When I saw the governor this time, he didn't ask me why I came to the Rundu alone, nor did he reprimand me. He seemed very calm. Don't you think this is a bit strange? The governor's personality wasn't like this before." Lin Shuanghe's eyes moved and he laughed. "This is a very obvious matter to begin with. You came to the Rundu to save the people of the Rundu. Since it's to save people, Huaijin definitely won't say anything. You've been busy and tired these days. Huaijin doesn't even have enough time to worry about you, so why would he reprimand you? Little sister you might have some misunderstandings about Huaijin. He's actually not such a heartless person. He's very gentle, especially towards the people he likes." He Yan. Lin Shuanghe's answer was irrelevant, and for a moment He Yan didn't know what to say. After a moment of silence she could only say, "Forget it. If he doesn't care about this matter, I don't have to keep worrying about it." He Rufei was more important now. He Rufei had committed such a great crime, and she didn't have much time to take revenge bit by bit. As long as He Rufei held the title of General Feihong, it would be a disaster for the people of Dawei. "Don't think too much," Lin Shuanghe comforted her. "In a few days we'll return to Shuajing. When we return to Shuajing, I'll take you around to relax. Oh right, your family is also in Shuajing, right? It's also a good thing for you to reunite with your father and brother after you return. However, your identity is a bit troublesome. But it's not a big deal. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. We'll think of a solution together." Return to Shuajing? He Yan was stunned. She wanted to return to Shuajing, but it was her idea. Why did Lin Shuanghe mean that Xiao Ju wanted to go back as well? Not long after you left the Liang Province Guard, Huaijin received a decree from the capital to bring a portion of the Liang Province Guard's new recruits and the Nan Province Guard soldiers back to Shuajing. However, at that time, we were all worried about the situation in the Rundu. Huaijin and I arrived first, and the soldiers and horses followed behind. In the end, we have to go back. With Yudo's current situation, it's impossible for the world to be as peaceful as before. It's also good to go back earlier. Lin Shuanghe looked at her and asked curiously, "What, you don't want to go back?" He Yan shook his head. "No, I'm not. No, it's just a bit unexpected." If Xiao Ju also wanted to go back, then wouldn't they have to travel together again? She had clearly made up her mind to stay far away from him, so as not to implicate him. Now, it seemed that this ill-fated relationship was particularly stubborn. It was inevitable that they would have to live together again. However, her current feelings towards Xiaoju were extremely complicated. Because of Hirufei's actions, she had no choice but to face some problems head-on. Dragging Xiaoju into this was truly harmful without any benefit. Forget it. Since things had already gotten to this point, there was no point in thinking about it anymore. She could only do as Lin Shuanghe said. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. She could only go and see what would happen. She spoke a few more words with Lin Shuanghe before leaving. Lin Shuanghe looked at He Yan's back and propped up his fan under his chin. After thinking for a moment, he sighed and said to himself, he actually didn't reprimand her. It seems that once second young Master Xiao is enlightened, he really is formidable and brilliant. No wonder he's the number one in the Xianchang Guan. He happily followed after her. He Yan bid farewell to Lin Shuanghe and planned to return to her room to write about her encounter with Yudo in the Rundu. She could find some clues from every battle. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Before she reached her room, she happened to see someone practicing martial arts in the backyard. The martial artist's movements were very big. Originally, the vegetation in the Rundu had been plucked bare due to the famine. His sword and saber movements directly chopped off the branches, leaving only a bare tree trunk. It looked particularly pitiful. Hearing that someone was coming, the person stopped what he was doing and kept his Fengtian halberd by his side. He turned around to look. Silver robe, long halberd, long hair tied up high, arrogant and proud. Who else could it be but Yan He? General's Yan, He Yan said. Oh, it's He Yan. He Yan walked to the side. His subordinate handed him a soaked handkerchief. He casually wiped his hands and threw it to the side. He walked to the steps and sat down. He did not forget to call out to He Yan, sit. He Yan thought for a moment, and sat down beside him. Were you secretly watching me practice my spear just now? Yan He said. How is it? Have you never seen such brilliant spear skills before? He Yan was speechless for a moment. He smiled and said, it is indeed brilliant. Looking around in the entire Dewei, there is no one else who has such spear skills other than Generals Yan. Hearing this, He Yan smirked proudly. His gaze towards He Yan became gentler. He scoffed, you have good taste. He Yan sighed in his heart. After so many years, Yan He's temperament did not change at all. As long as one went along with him, it would be easy to please him. When they were at the Xianchang dojo, if Lin Shuanghe and He Yan were competing for the last place, then Yan He and Xiaoju were competing for the first place. However, there was no suspense in their competition. Every time, Yan He was second and Xiaoju was first. The young people who studied in the dojo all came from good family backgrounds. They were the cream of the crop. It was normal for them to be competitive. However, Yan He's competitive nature was exceptionally strong. He Yan still remembered that every few days in the dojo, Yan He would challenge Xiaoju. It was similar to how Wang Ba challenged her in Liang province. Xiaoju was too lazy to bother with such challenges most of the time. When she was annoyed, she would challenge Yan He. Regardless of whether it was civil or martial, archery or horse, the result was the same every time. Yan He was defeated but continued to challenge. In fact, on this point, He Yan had always felt that Yan He and she were somewhat similar. Unfortunately, although she had the intention of appreciating each other, Yan He did not appreciate it. He Yan hated him very much. He was arrogant by nature, and had his eyes on the top of his head. He probably thought that trash was not worth a second look. It would be good if he was like Lin Shuanghe who had some expertise. However, He Yan was useless. In the Xianchang dojo, being useless was a crime. When Yan He was young, he really did everything he could to make fun of He Yan. He made her look bad in front of everyone. He secretly made things difficult for her. During the archery and horse competition, he purposely bumped He Yan's horse. He really did all kinds of things. Speaking of which, when He Yan was studying in the Xianchang dojo, Yan He was probably the number one person she hated the most. Later, she left the Xianchang dojo and joined the army. Xiaoju also joined the army. Not long after, Yan He also joined the army. However, Yan He could be considered to have inherited his father's business. Now he was young and was doing well. That day when the Rundu was in danger, He Yan wrote him a letter asking for help. She also felt that with Yanhe's temperament, he would come. Although she did not expect him to come with Xiao Ju. If it was a few years ago, Yan would never have thought that there would be a day when she could sit and talk to Yanhe calmly. Actually, she didn't know how she had offended Yanhe back then. Logically speaking, she hadn't spoken much to Yanhe and hadn't hindered him in any way. Why was it that no matter how carefully she treated him, Yanhe just couldn't stand her? This question could be considered one of the 10 unsolved mysteries of Yan's youth. Now that Yanhe was sitting beside her, although there was still a shadow of his youth between his brows, but he was much calmer. It had been so many years, but he still hated Hirufei. What kind of power was this? Yan said casually, of course. Everyone says that Dewei has 2 famous generals. One is General Fei Hong, and the other is General Feng Yan. I don't think so. There was no need to talk about Governor Xiao. He was indeed very powerful. However, that General Fei Hong was not as good as he was described to be. The Rundu is so close to Huayuan, but he did not come to the city's aid. Moreover, he won the battle in Huayuan with a heavy loss. How can he be compared to Generals Yan? I really don't know how he became famous. Generally speaking, if one cursed Hirufei to death, they would be able to gain Yanhe's favor. This was definitely true. As expected, Yanhe's eyes lit up when he heard this. He laughed and said, Muan Lang, I think you are very different from others. Just based on this point alone, you are already better than many people. Although I don't agree with what you said about Xiao Huijin, Hirufei, you are absolutely right. He really can't be compared to me. Yan rolled his eyes silently in his heart and said, Yes, but Generals Yan, you also don't like General Fei Hong? I thought that all generals liked him. Don't like him? Yanhe shook his head and said unconcernedly, Not really. I just feel that he is disappointing and doesn't deserve this title. Yan was elated. Was this going to reveal the top 10 unsolved mysteries of her youth? After so many years, she finally knew the reason why Yanhe was always targeting her. What do you mean by disappointing? Yan tilted her head and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with genuine doubts. Because they both disliked Hirufei, Yanhe found the young man in front of him more pleasing to the eye. He said without thinking, Of course he is disappointing. He received Xiao Huijin's swordsmanship guidance, but he still practiced to that extent. If it was me, I could do 10,000 times better than him. Xiao Huijin was also a very strange person. What kind of foresight did he have? He didn't teach the academy's outstanding talents, but instead spent time teaching a fool. However, he was stingy with sparring with me. Tell me, how can there be such a person in this world? Swordsmanship, guidance? Yes. Yanhe looked at her and said, You didn't expect it, right? The so-called unparalleled swordsmanship of General Fei Hong was actually taught by Xiao Huijin. Do you think he is crazy?